A boom. Welcome back, everybody. Hello, it's me, Shweeby. I'm here with the glorious and beautiful Bohemian Dragon.
Hello. Okay, that's so not me. I'm not the cat ears girl. Okay.
Oh,
Hi
come on.
guys.
You could be bathtub water girl. Come on.
Okay, nobody wants to see this in a bathing suit, in a bathtub, or a swimming pool, or a hot tub. And I know Alex has made the argument of, oh well, they watch other
I
things.
beg to
I don't.
differ. I
I
beg to
just
differ.
don't think so. Like I just, I mean, it's yeah, no.
Alright, well, welcome everybody back to the SOMA lore stream that we were trying to have. We were attempting to use StreamYard, but it glitched out and refused to actually show up on YouTube. So, Brooke and Crimson, thank you for letting us know that it wasn't working. And
Yes.
welcome back. So, we're going to be going over SOMA files, and we do have some SOMA transmissions actual videos to watch, and that the videos themselves are round up to about an hour of lore that I most definitely missed during the streams because I'm a freaking squirrel and I was being chased by angry squish monsters. So,
Hi, Brooke. Yeah, so, well, keep in mind that the transmission videos, when we finally get around to watching them, is actually prequel information. So it's going to be events
ooh.
that happened before the start of the game where Simon Jarrett wakes up in the chair at Lambda. Okay,
Ah.
so it's going to be stuff that happened leading up to and filling in some blanks as to what happened to the Pathos 2 crew before Simon showed up there for whatever reason. So there's that. Now the case files, that's also a lot of prequel stuff, but it's more in lines with some of the lore that we caught in game. So,
Alright.
as I was trying to ask you before StreamYard decided it just was going to go, was first off, what's your overall thoughts on the game? I mean, I know you came at me like after you finished it, and you sent me, and you're all like, "I'm gonna carve your heart out with a spork" or something like that. I'm like, "Oh my god, what did I do?"
Okay.
And I'm like, "What?"
Okay, so overall, I really enjoyed Soma for not only for the spooky, scary, I'm underwater, it's a big fear, all of that, the overall storyline that it had to share, including both types of endings that it had to offer, I really enjoyed. The reason I sent you such a threatening DM was because that started a conversation between Phoenix and I going over like the overall idea of like how the hell logistically would that work? How would you get a soul or a consciousness or whatever you want to title it as into a machine? And then it just spiraled out of control for like the next 2 hours, almost 3 hours of it just back and forth of like really hard difference of opinions. It was good, but it was like I wanted to strangle him and you because you're the reason I played the game in the first place. But overall, I really liked it.
Well, Soma is really good at invoking those kinds of conversations, like what does it mean to be human, which is, I think, part of what makes this game such probably Fractional's most pivotal game, because I know, like, there are people that really love Amnesia, and the Amnesia series and Penumbra
Yes.
series, but I can't get into the Amnesia series. Like the lore itself just does not make sense to me because it's just all over the place. Penumbra just doesn't seem like it really has lore. So the Soma is one of those games where it makes you think.
Gotcha.
And I love games that make you think. So
For me, Amnesia, I was able to take a different experience with it, but you can't look at all three titles that they have for Amnesia now as being all tied in because A Machine for Pigs did not sync up with the other two all that
yeah.
much. There was so little to go on with like the orb and stuff.
Yeah.
Descent to Darkness and Rebirth is where it's tied in and meshed, and they actually pull in a lot of the characters from Dark Descent that I was like, oh my god, yeah, that was the one professor. So yeah, I like those two. But as far as like a single game where that's all it took was one game to make you think so much about like exactly where you stand on something, Soma is where it's at. I honestly, and don't get me wrong, I love the Amnesia series. I'm a hardcore fan of Amnesia series. Soma, I think, is the best title that I have played from fictional games so far.
Yeah, it just they really, and the attention to detail, which we're gonna get into when we start discussing the lore. There's just so many little things that are like that just really stands out. The attention to detail, the crafting of the game, like it's very immersive. It really draws you in. It's a somewhat believable storyline and plot. And there's so many things that in this, and the biggest thing for me is like a lot of the concepts they introduced in Soma at the time were considered science fiction, and this is one of those cases. Soma is one of those cases where um the science fiction pushed or led, or in many ways, and I've seen this with a lot of science fiction shows and books and games, is that the science fiction in the game or the book or the show, it almost acts as like a self-fulfilling prophecy, where it is prophetic about like things that are coming. So when we start getting into the lore, there's several concepts within the game that were at the time science fiction that are now have been proven to be actual scientific concepts
Oh,
that are
wow.
completely legit. So we'll get into that here in a little bit. But yeah, it's kind of, it just really blows the mind,
Right.
you
Or
know.
as Brooke puts it, it made you do a think thonk. Yeah,
Yes,
pretty much.
definitely.
It made you think so hard you thonked. You thonked on it.
Yeah.
All right. Did we
Or
want to
in
go
this
ahead and
case,
start
carve
with
my
the?
heart out.
Huh? Sorry. Go ahead.
I said in this case, wanting you to carve my heart out with a spork.
That was only because of the conversation that happened between Phoenix and myself that we
Okay,
might
so
get
now
into.
I have to ask, so do you think the people in the Ark are human?
See, okay, we'll never get to the case files if we start this shit, because that is
No, yes,
exactly.
I don't need the whole reason behind it. I
Okay,
just want to know yes or no.
okay. So when we first started that conversation, I was a very hard no. I don't believe that they were human. But
Okay.
talking with Phoenix and then like some different things that we hashed out, which we'll probably get further into in this, I gave him
Mm-hmm.
the a different change in answer of a it could be possible. But until I see that shit in person, I'm only gonna give it a maybe. But I refuse to give it a hard yes. But I'm either a maybe or a fucking no. They're not. So because the idea of putting a consciousness, like, we can't quite define what that is, and then they
Right.
said they somehow copied it and put it in a machine.
Yeah.
That's weird to me. I cannot with all of my brain power, my ADHD brain power, wrap my actual like thought process around that as to how logistically that works. So for me that was just like, what? No. Brooke says,
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
sorry, I was gonna say Brooks is also loving the glass issues. Aw, thank you. I didn't want to wear them, but I have to because the print is very tiny.
Um, for me, I would say yes, they are a version of humanity, but it's like humanity 2.0,
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
yeah.
Because even if by some chance later on down the road they figure out how to get back out of the Ark into some kind of blind bros gang, yes. Um, but if they figure out some way to get back out of the Ark and into individual bodies again,
Right.
those individual bodies, I mean, realistically, the only way they could do it and have it be like what it was before is they would have to grow an artificial body and then somehow insert themselves into that body's consciousness. And then we're looking at possibly it being a lot like, I don't think you've seen The Hundred, but spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen season 7. But in season 7, they have this thing where basically they figured out that they can transfer people from body to body using these specialized chips.
Okay.
So, these
Same
specialized
concept as
microchips.
Soma, just about.
Yeah. So, um, it's one of those cases where it's like they're still not gonna be. It's not gonna be like birth.
Right.
But I think with science being what it is now, especially now they can make test tube babies for crying out loud.
Right.
I mean, I think we're vastly approaching that scientific point where what it means to be human, to be born, is going to start getting to be different, you know.
Right.
Um, and it's going to start being different. So it's going to redefine, that
What it
whole
means to be
birth,
human.
death, life cycle,
Right.
you know.
See, Phoenix and I
So,
had this exact part of our conversation pop up, and my thing was, and the reason that I gave it such a hard no is because the human body continued to live on. So all that these machines are memories. That's all to me is what. Granted, they were able to make more memories, so it was a very like sci-fi, super advanced form of technology that we don't have right now, or at least as far as I'm aware, we don't have right now. So again, the reason why it's not really human, it's more like a very super in-depth like book of what. Well, at this point, by the end of the game, a digital copy of stories of what humans once were. At least
yeah.
for me, that's how I came to understand it. But again, we also
Yeah.
talked about, let's say that somehow they either get found or they manage to make bodies or whatever, would they be considered human still?
Mhm.
Phoenix still says yes, and I'm going no, because that's no longer human. It's different. Much like you said, human 2.0.
Okay, so let me ask you this, because let's say there's some kind of rescue operation, which goes into one of my conspiracy theories that there's actually still humans out there. Okay, alive and healthy humans, and I have theories around that. But it'll go into more of my theories as to why I think that they could absolutely make a sequel to this game very easily. Um, but they uh so say they get rescued. Okay, the Ark gets rescued,
Mm-hmm.
and whoever it is that rescues them, with their help through the computer communication, figures out how to insert them back into a body. Well, what if they do it test tube baby style, and insert them in that way into an unborn child, and insert that consciousness into a unborn child in the womb.
Right.
I mean, are they not human then?
See, I don't know. Like that's so weird because it would just be an empty shell that you're shoving memories into. Or kind of like what Brooke says, it's like putting your memories into an SD card, but the ability to make more memories kind of odd a little bit, but if you think of it like that, it's like taking the SD card from something that once was and then we
Hmm.
shove it into assumedly an empty husk. I
So
don't know if I would still consider that human.
is what's throwing you off the fact that there wasn't like a death? Is that maybe what's throwing you off?
It's
Is
not the
like you
death so much because death can happen to anything. I mean, technically, if you want to go on about it, electricity itself is a form of like energy.
right
So, and we also
on
talked
off
about we
on
talked
off?
about those laws. You know, energy cannot be no, not energy. The matter can't be destroyed or created or whatever. That one. So we talked about
It
that.
can only yeah.
That.
Matter cannot be completely obliterated. It can only be altered, transferred, transmuted, that kind of sort of thing.
Right, and that's how he
So,
refuted some of my no's was like, okay. So cuz then it just went onto the topic of souls and stuff and like but I told him a lot of the reason why I'm saying no is a lot of my own beliefs and what I was brought up to believe, but that doesn't mean I'm not open-minded, but it's still hard for me to wrap my head around the concept of we somehow copied, did not take, we copied a consciousness, put it in a thing, then they were talking about if they get rescued, putting into another thing. Is that human?
yeah.
I'm still gonna say no, not really. It's something else. And I honestly feel like, let's say if they do make a sequel, which I wouldn't be against, Let's say maybe there are some humans that were somehow managed to survive all that, which I totally believe could be possible.
Hmm.
And they're the ones that rescue them. They give them these brand new bodies, whatever the hell they are. I can already tell you that there is going to be a rift or a divide between the population of pure humans, as what they're going to most likely
Hmm.
call themselves, and then whatever they're going to label as these artificial lives or something.
Right.
I can already see that being a thing.
Yeah. Well, it's already a thing in various other parts of our society for just like skin color and personal religious beliefs. So I mean, why wouldn't it be a thing on, whether or not you're born human versus made human?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, yeah. No,
But
I agree.
yep. All right, let's get into some case files.
Okay, so case file number 1
All right.
is item 1264, surveyor. The surveillance cameras at Lambda have been acting strangely by going against the work pattern. Cameras inside the cargo holds are especially affected by these phenomena. Studying the camera behavior has yielded very little, as their focus never, and then it's garbled, anything that could be considered sensitive information, garbled. Controlling the surveillance cameras seems mostly concerned about wall sections without any apparent importance.
Hmm.
SE or SSE Woolcheck classes gang. Hi Pyramid. Um
Hi, Vinny.
uh
We'll
I was
check.
asked to review the video feed and has concluded that the only connection between the targeted wall sections is they all shield a specific shape of structure gel piping, a sharp sweep elbow. Now if you don't know anything about piping, sharp sweep elbows, if you're going to have a leak somewhere, anywhere in any kind of piping structure, that's like one type of piping where it is probably going to happen. Like first off,
Because
like
there's a
if you're going to
bend in
have
the pipe, right?
well, it's because it's so a sharp sweep elbow is usually like, a straight 90.
Yeah.
Okay. And because of the way the pressure feedback goes through that area, you get any kind of weird bubble or whatever. It can get in there and then it can cause either the top part or this bottom part to kind of expand just enough to cause a leak. Because that
Ah.
bubble will cause a pressure shift. Typically, you'll know if somebody has piped something shoddily because that elbow will be leaking. So, um,
Huh.
Pyramid says if we're doing lore streams now, don't forget me for Yukaza or the world ends with you, Schweebs. Kingdom Hearts is too much of a dumpster fire.
Yeah, we did that
Yes.
one once. That was so crazy. That was a long stream too.
Oh, there is so much,
I
but
do
yeah,
have to
no.
start playing the Yakuza games. I got a few of them during like random Steam sales here and there, so I was like, I might play these. So
Yeah,
okay.
Kingdom Hearts is definitely like a dumpster fire
Oh
of
yeah.
lore. Oh my god. What's canon? What's not canon? What does Disney have to say versus the game? Ah! Yeah. I know. I've heard a few, and this was even when I remember hearing some lore dumpster fires with Kingdom Hearts way back when just the second one had come out, like the second video game. So it's been debated that long.
Jeez.
So, anyways, okay. So the sharp sweep elbow, and then part has been shown to break during sudden pressure changes, which is exactly what I talked about. The ghost operator has since stopped controlling the cameras, and then if you scroll down, it shows this weird
Like
camera feed.
yeah, like a
But
strange.
what's in well, there's kind of like this weird light that's passing over it, like a sensor sweep type of thing going on.
Yeah.
Um, so it is kind of interesting that so basically the WoW started. I'm sorry, I need to get my shoes back on, and I threw one off to the side because I'm a squirrel. Um, I was like, no, I don't want them now. I want them. Um, so the WoW,
Wow.
monitoring the structure gel piping, you know, and like paying particular attention to it makes me wonder if that's when it first started trying to figure out how to get the structure gel into other places because I mean shoes, yes. um Actually they're
Do not tell me they're Crocs.
chanclas. No,
Okay.
they're chanclas.
Okay. It's like, if you got Crocs, I'm getting some freaking shaving cream and I'm gonna fill those biatches up. Actually, there was something I wanted to discuss with you. So I don't know if you've ever seen this, and I forgot where I saw this. So our scientists in this universe they're a funny bunch. They like to just see what they can do with blank codes and machines and see what happens. If I find it, I'll send you the video later. What it is, it's this starfish looking thing. It's got 4 corners. They kind of left a lot of the codes blank, but left it to be a self-learning thing. It had cameras, it had the ability to move, but they didn't turn anything on. All they did was turn it on just to see what would happen. So when it first kicks on, you can tell that it's the programming itself is trying to figure itself out. In a matter of hours, it figured out that it can move. Then it discovered that it has cameras so it can see what it's doing. And then eventually this shit starts moving and crawling around, just doing whatever. And it's like, that made me think of the WoW.
And it was a learning AI, so that doesn't surprise me.
Right, but that kind of reminded me of the WoW.
Anyway. Yeah. So
in the terms of like, okay, so they made the WoW, and the WoW was supposed to be doing one thing, but something somewhere in its coding either got corrupted or it learned some kind of new trick, and then it started taking stuff into its own hands.
Right.
Or
so
tentacles.
Yeah. So the WoW initially, like, you missed some of the documentation because you were going through quite fast. And Brooke, yes, but I am a partially Latino mom, so they don't need my shoes.
She's gonna be throwing the shoes instead. She'll be like,
in fact, my youngest is outside making like she's doing this at me. Like, yeah, hit me, mom, hit me.
see, they know what's going on.
Oh, they know.
Are you the type that screams your kid's name? You're like, Devin! Don't you ever do that again! I swear to God, I hit you with my shoe! Whap! Poof! Ah!
Yeah. Oh, I don't even need to take my shoe off. I just I have a look. Every good mom has what is known as the mom look, that, and I've got somewhere, I had a TikTok video I saw where this woman did this video where it's her and her teenage son, and he's standing behind her, and they're kind of miming how they would react to another kid having a meltdown that was inappropriate in public. And it's that, as a parent, you go through these things when you see another kid screwing off in public. First, you have this relief that it's not your kid. Then you have the quick pitying of the other mom, but then when the other mom doesn't do anything, then you start judging her.
Yep.
And then what happens next is the look back at your kids like, you better not freaking do this crap ever.
It's like, do it one time, see what happens.
Yeah. And then but the way it was mimed so perfectly was when the mom did the look back at the kid, his eyes go like saucers and he leans back and like, no, mom, never. And it was so perfectly executed. I'm like, yep.
I'm like, great.
That's the look. And I showed my husband, and he's like, he didn't quite. It's okay. I get this.
All right.
Anyways, but okay, back to the WoW. So one of the things that you missed when you didn't read all the documentation at it'll come to me, but one of the stations, it was the station where Catherine's bedroom was. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So there was a bunch of documentation in there as to what was kind of going on with the WoW. So the WoW started out as an experiment headed up by Carthage. And Carthage was working with 3 doctors of the Pathos 2 crew, okay? It was working with Mr. I am a scary Slenderman, popping up, teleporting all over the place, asshole.
Yeah.
What?
There's an ad on my screen. It's for some sandwich somewhere.
Oh.
And she goes, sandwich. I know, it does look good, though.
I only ever get Rule 1 protein ads because I order from them all the time. So
Ah,
it's like that's what popped
I've
up on
never
my screen
ordered a
right now.
sandwich, so maybe it's just for me. Maybe I need to go make a sandwich. But anyways, so Doctor popping up jerk
So
face.
yeah, and so then there's that guy, and then Susan, whatever her name was, that unfortunately ended up having her head blown off. And then uh Sarang, who was the Asian looking doctor or Indian doctor. I'm not entirely certain what his nationality was. I don't remember off the top of my head. I might say it in here.
Was he the guy
Um,
that was in the file that we found?
yeah, he was,
Okay.
and he's the one who offed himself first right after having the scan, because remember he had that weird theory about continuity.
Yeah.
Okay, so Carthage had started this um well before the comet. Okay, so well before the comet that ended the world. Okay, they had started this experiment with the WoW, I think, with the idea of making, maybe at some point making Pathos 2, like the location, be completely automated. I think that was their original goal.
It
Because you
certainly
have to,
sounded like it.
because they've done long-term, and my husband, if he was here, could speak on this, but they've done long-term studies on the effects of people who are not in contact, like, with like air and plants and sky and stuff, and like how it absolutely like screws up the mind and can make people go crazy. And so teams that have done long underwater studies, even though, yeah, they're still surrounded like by plant life and whatnot, it's still very kind of alien to them. And
Yeah.
same with people who they send out in space for a long, long time. That there's definitely no plants out there. Um, and so I think their original goal had been to make something to where they could automate Pathos 2 and have the WoW do everything. Well, then the comet came, and so they're like, well, maybe the WoW could take the load off of the people who are left alive, because where they were shielded under the water like that, they had the best chance at survival. So then they pushed Sarang and the other doctors to kind of let the WoW take over. Unfortunately, the WoW made some really terrible decisions, and I think there's reasons for that, and we'll get into that as we go along. And I have a theory as to why the WoW corrupted itself, and that it wasn't the WoW's fault, and it wasn't the doctor's fault. So, because when you start interacting with scary teleporty doctor guy, he gives every impression that he's kind of almost demonic, right?
Just a touch, yeah.
Like there's something not right about him. And so it kind of lends itself to this idea that maybe, oh, he's the one who corrupted it, that now he's trying to right his wrongs, type of thing. But I don't think that's the case. So okay, so let's
Shall we move on to item 2656? Okay, I'll cover this one then.
Okay, cool.
Let's see. So, item 2656, Vivarium. The machine has the appearance of a heavily modified monitor fixed to a massive nest of cables and controls. Peter Starsky found the contraption... Stratsky. Yep, dyslexia. Strasky found the contraption during a salvage mission. Errant. The screen rolled and flickered, but it shut down as it was pulled out from the container. None of the crew stepped forward to take credit, but the construction suggests, since Thabo is unavailable for questioning, the machine's origin remains a mystery. Considering the lack of information and the general unease it has started to cause, the machine will be disassembled. No, disassemble! Screen lit up and showed distorted schematics. After trying different switches and keys, the oblique levers were found to be torsion... What is this word? Attenuation?
Torsion attenuation controls.
Gotcha.
So, did you ever mess with those old TVs from the 80s? I don't know if you remember this, because
is that the one where you needed the pliers to turn them?
Yeah, where you had to turn two separate dials in order to get locked into the right transmission, so you could actually watch the news, cartoons, whatever.
Yep.
And if you didn't have like the two, like if one dial stopped working, you were screwed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that's kind of what those are. Is that?
Okay, that makes sense. let's see. Controls which could stabilize the picked blank, revealing a complex set of instructions. The machine is now under quarantine. AM engineer Imogen Reed has asked for an exception, special permission granted.
Okay, and then there's a video.
Yeah, I don't know how loud this will be. Probably kind of loud. It is a few minutes, so let's take a look. See if this is too loud for anybody. Let me know, or if it's too quiet, I'll adjust it accordingly. So this was the machine they found.
So this is Imogen in the video. She has been asked. She asked special permission to basically study the machine, the vivarium, is what they're calling it. And so she's doing research on it. Imogen's like one of the main engineers for the Pathos 2 crew. Now, by the time Simon Jarrett shows up at Lambda, Imogen has been dead for a while, and it's her body that we find out later that he's inhabiting.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So we're seeing Imogen a little bit. So she's exited the room.
Okay. Yeah, because I feel like I definitely missed a lot of stuff on Reed, because at one point I thought she was a baddie or something. And then I was like, no, she's actually kind of dead, so I'm not really sure how that worked out.
Yeah. So she's
wow, that
doing
thing's
this
huge.
research. Yeah. And so I think the vivarium. So we find out at some point, because when we're with Catherine working on the Ark, that the vivarium was something that the WoW started working on. And Catherine talks about it in the game, about how it was the WoW's work on the vivarium that led her to be able to figure out how to capture the images of the Pathos 2 crew and put them into the Ark successfully. So what I think the vivarium is I think this is WoW's first attempt to create itself. Because remember, all this happened like either not long after the comet hit, or they knew about the comet, or happened before the comet hit. There's some discrepancies a little bit. I mean, we'd have to look at the timeline. I think the vivarium was found after the comet was at least sighted or had hit. So there's a little bit of time difference. But I think this was the WoW's first like kind of incarnation of some kind of something that it made. I think it was made in hopes of communicating with the Pathos 2 crew better.
So it was trying to make a physical body that it could use to do something
to interact
with.
Yes, to do something with, to interact with, because I think it very quickly realized that having 2 arms, 2 hands, 2 feet, and 2 legs was far superior. But figuring out how to get from point A to point B takes some experimentation.
Right.
So I think this was its first go around with trying to figure it out. The fact that the vivarium had an interface, though, in which you could type and interact with and stuff, it's very interesting. It's a very different kind of thing, and especially after seeing the WoW at the end of the game, where you see that it really doesn't have it, like it's just like a core, right? Yeah. So there's no real way for the WoW to really interact. Like, you could input stuff computer-wise, but you couldn't interact with it directly. You know, like it couldn't interact with you directly because there was no interface for it. So the WoW trying to make something like the vivarium in order to interact and mimic, you know, remember the mockingbirds, to mimic the humans, to try to learn how to be human. It's a very interesting concept that the machine realized that it was inferior, so it tried to copy.
It kind of comes across. Have you seen the movie Sphere?
No.
Okay. If you're into spooky sci-fi things, there's a little bit of gore, nothing too over the top, but it's underwater sci-fi weird stuff that happens.
I
And
think it's been on my list to watch before, but I will write it down.
it's pretty good. Definitely one that I'll only watch like once every few years because it's that level of creepy and definitely leads to some questions. But it's more
Uh-huh.
supernatural sci-fi stuff. But something about the Vivarium definitely reminds me of the Sphere entity because it in itself is not human. I'm still not quite sure what that thing is, but it does try to communicate with the crew itself in its own
Uh-huh.
manner, but it has such a limited understanding of how to do that, so it actually comes across as like almost like a spoiled brat in a
Yeah.
weird sense.
So this is where it gets interesting, is that the vivarium is showing Imogen falling on the floor at the very end of this video. It's showing her falling on the floor into what we find out later is a seizure.
Oh.
So yeah, almost like it was predicting that that was going to happen. And Imogen, of course, freaks out and leaves. So, um,
How would it have been able to do something like that, though?
well, okay. So here's the thing: they had the Pathos 2 crew in conjunction with Carthage. So Carthage was the main company that was funding their whole thing. You know, the whole project, the whole thing. Um, they all had these what they called black boxes embedded, and there was a file at one point that showed where the black box was in the brain stem.
Right.
Okay, but they all had these black boxes, and those black boxes were directly connected to the mainframe, so that they could monitor heart and brain activity and stuff. And it's similar to some of the like monitoring equipment that they have in some hospitals now, where like they like the one that they put this little sensor on your finger and it can tell them your oxygen level in your blood. It can tell them like your pulse rate. It can tell, things like that, so they don't have to, touch you as much anymore for various different little things. Some of them are even sensitive enough to pick up your body temperature. So this black box basically hooked everybody together, but also hooked back in, and it recorded memories, it recorded feelings, it recorded like whether anxiety levels and stuff. Like it would warn the crew if like they had like a spike in temperature or whatever. So my thoughts here is that because there was such comprehensive knowledge or attained through the black boxes, now they've done scientific studies on people who have seizures, and there is things that happen chemically and trigger and electrical wise in the brain right before a seizure happens.
Oh, wow.
And so and because of that, they've been able, so like for instance, it causes a change in body smell. And so, like seizure dogs, that's what they're trained for.
Oh,
Is
wow.
they're trained to sense to smell that smell, because the dog's nose is so much more sensitive to ours.
Right.
So they are trained to pick up that. There's also a change in like skin flushing, and there's some other little like things that like animals pick up on so much better than humans. And so that's like, so if you have a trained seizure dog, that's what they go for, and so they can alert their owners right before a seizure happens, because there's these little changes, that body changes that happen right before a seizure happens. Now, it doesn't happen to everybody who has seizures, but there are enough little changes that it can be trained for or watched for or monitored now.
Huh.
And so my guess is that Imogen's black box was showing these signs, like in the brain scans that they were doing, the low level brain scans that were being done from the black box, and then also from working with the seats, the pilot seats. And so the vivarium was trying, or the WoW in this case, was trying to warn her, hey, heads up, you've got this medical condition, it's about to cause wreak havoc in your life.
Oh, wow.
I think that's what it was trying to do, was it was trying, because there's the WoW itself is not malicious.
Was she known to have seizures?
No.
Huh.
No, she wasn't. And that's the thing is that and it can, and there's of course there's case studies about like people who have late life onset seizures and stuff, and it can happen from elevated stress levels and that kind of sort of thing. But one of the things that has been recorded in people who have spent copious amounts of time under the sea is that they can get stress levels that are high enough that it will cause seizure-like activity in the brain.
And
So
considering everything that happened to their world, it's a high possibility she could have been,
mhm,
a higher variable to have that happen to her.
mhm.
Okay. Okay.
Well, the human body is so interesting in that like for instance, everybody carries the diabetes gene. So the gene that causes diabetes lives in everybody's body, and it can be anything from a heart attack to a fever that can trip that whatever the mechanism is inside of that cell structure to go on, which is why you have these people that like weren't diabetic. Oh, so and so had a heart attack, or so and so had the flu, and now all of a sudden they have diabetes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, in the case of like my dad and my grandmother, it was a chemical that they worked with on the farm. Like neither one of them had diabetes, and then they were using this one particular chemical for monitoring their crops, and the chemical, because they were the only two in the family that were doing that part of the farm, um, they ended up with diabetes, whereas the rest of the family did not.
Hmm.
And it
Interesting.
hadn't been, you know, like nobody else in the family had diabetes, and it wasn't anything that was recorded. So, but the human body's so interesting in that like it even and stress, like they've done so many studies in the last so many years, especially on stress and what it does to our bodies, like the elevated cortisol levels and how it can absolutely just wreak havoc on your system. So it wouldn't surprise me if that, like you said, especially with, everything that was going on, if that was the case and that's what tripped it off. We will never know what it was that caused Imogen to start having the seizures. That isn't known. That's not in the files, or anywhere in the game. It's just that, they document in these files that she does start having seizures. So,
After that encounter with Vivarium?
well, not long afterwards, yes.
Wow. Okay.
So,
So yeah, I would
yeah.
have to agree. In that case, it sounds like it was trying to warn her. Because the thing is, it's not good and it's not bad. It's kind of a neutral entity that just kind of goes, okay, I got something to do now.
Well,
At least that's how I
it,
came to understand.
it was originally designed to be an assisted AI. So it was supposed to be an AI that assisted humans. So if that is its mission parameters, I could very well see that, oh, hey, it has this information about Imogen. Well, it can't communicate directly. It can't talk. It's not like, Friday or, with, Robert Downey Jr., or not Robert, Tony Stark,
Right.
in the Avengers. Okay, it's not like that. Um, so I absolutely, it doesn't have a voice of its own. It wasn't given that, so it's trying to reach out and communicate back somehow with, because there's only so much you can tell somebody via code.
Right. Unless you're
you know
really good at reading binary, which I haven't done since college. Okay.
Reading binary, her.
Alright, shall we move on to the next item?
Yes.
Alright,
Yeah,
let me pop open that, and it is your turn, madam.
it is.
Yeah, I read the
Okay.
last one.
Okay. So item 3098, algamam. A control board at Epsilon Manufacturing has been covered by structure gel and rendered inoperable. The structure gel has dropped from a leak in the ceiling and managed to cover the control board as well as a good part of the floor. Cleaning up the structure gel, FST Azario noticed that some gel had coagulated and fused with the control board. The system itself seems unharmed, and the factory line is still operating. Blah. A closer look has determined that the coagulated gel cannot be removed. Blah blah blah. Serious damage to the control board and possibly the system. Chief Factor Adams has decided as long as it is working properly, there's no reason to attempt any surgery. So then it shows a picture of the control board, clearly with wow
Wow
structure
stuff on
gel.
it, yeah.
Yeah. Now, what they don't like wasn't really Like, they talk about it briefly, and Catherine alludes to it, but basically the structure gel is like, have you ever seen the conductive paint?
Yeah. Yeah, I
Okay, so
kind of came across that WoW is
okay.
kind of like a battery, just about.
Well,
A
kind
little.
of, but like the structure gel, rather than using wires to connect everything, the structure gel is what connects everything. Because, well, it being liquid, you can put it on anything, and get it places that it wouldn't be, into smaller areas that, running wires isn't just really easy to do.
Right.
Um, so what I imagine it as is basically a more viscous and probably a lot better, a higher grade of the conductive paint that they have now. So this is one of those where science isn't quite there yet, but it's almost there type of things.
Yeah.
Um, because they have this paint where you can paint it on and you can send small amounts of code through the paint because it's conductive.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so it's really neat stuff. Right now they're using it mostly for certain lighting boards and stuff, where so they can paint it from a control circuit in one area and then paint it up to a light, and it helps in areas where they can't run wires, but they can absolutely put paint because the paint conducts that energy flow.
That's cool.
So yeah, it is. So that's kind of what the structure gel is that it's conducts this data and this energy from point A to point B via the gel. So the fact that the WoW is trying to get to control boards and stuff by dripping structure gel on it makes sense, because wherever the structure gel is, the WoW is.
Right. And then considering it essentially turns into an armor, whatever it's on, it'll protect it up
Hmm.
until like something clearly actually damaging could break it. That's interesting.
Yeah.
All right. So
All right.
this next one is called Mockingbird. Item 4017, Mockingbird. Let's see. A standard UH3 articulated robot, active fluid memory with an approximated intelligence, shows a much more active mind, spontaneously developed a desire to socialize from observing human interaction.
Question mark.
Yeah. Question mark. Well, I'll wait till we get done, but
All right.
that does remind me of a few things that happened in the game.
Mm.
Alright. Intelligence first noticed by security officer Stromer while investigating an automated distress signal coming from Construct Depot 11. Alright. Mockingbird had pried another UH-3 open and removed its AI unit. Alright. Made motions resembling those of eating, moving it close to its camera and making sounds similar to the smacking of lips. Alright. It introduced itself as Chief Engineer Adam Goloski. Huh. Quarantined in T260 machine rep during the night it had taken itself apart. AM engineer Imogen Reed quickly recorded an interview in case the Mockingbird continued its self-destruction. It appears there is a real Adam Goloski working at Omicron. Invited Chief Engineer Goloski to talk to the imposter construct. Okay, so this, well, that leads to
So
so many questions. So is this kind of like what happened when we got to the one place in the oh, what was the thing called? We were supposed to get on it, but it came to life and then like started freaking out.
the Dunbat.
Yeah.
Kind of, only the Dunbat, in the Dunbat's case, I think it was more of the WoW had copied of one of the copies into the Dunbat, and whoever it was went nuts because they realized. Remember when we pull up what's his futz in the chair
Yeah.
in the and he goes a little cray cray at the beginning because he doesn't see whoever it was that he was hoping to see when he came out of the scan,
Yeah.
because we're trying to get the security cipher from him. And so until we get the parameters just right to where he doesn't question if that's his reality or not, he keeps going crazy. Well, I think what happened was it was a similar thing. It might have even been the same person, where it was a copy of them put into the Dunbat. The minute the Dunbat wakes up, they wake up in the Dunbat going, well, what the fuck? This is not the Ark.
Right.
Because the full expectation was either A, the Ark, or B, the scan room where they last left.
Right.
Those are the only two things that would have made sense in that person's mind. And some people, when confronted, like we all handle things differently when we're confronted with what we don't understand or the unfamiliar. There's fight, flight, freeze, and fawn.
Right.
So, some people, fight to them is freaking out. And that's, I think, what happened with the Dunbat. This is more of, I think it's more of the same. I think it's like, this is another incarnation of like the vivarium,
Mhm.
where this is like the next step for the WoW to try and communicate, but it still doesn't quite have the personality thing down right.
Right.
So I think what it did, and Catherine suspects, or somebody at some point documents, that they suspect that the WoW had been stealing brain scans for a while.
Oh.
And Gulaski, as the chief engineer at Omicron, was in the pilot seat at Omicron quite a bit, moving those different, like, remember the robots we had to avoid as we're going from one area to the other because some of them attack,
Yeah.
and they're and they got 2 arms and kind of weirdly blockish. Those are the things that when people sit in the pilot seats, that's what they're piloting, is they're piloting those different little helpers. Okay. And so I think what happened is at some point, Gulaski just happened to be in the wrong seat at the wrong time, and the WoW stole a copy of his brain scan from the pilot's seat, and then was like, okay, well, this is in the WoW's mind, this is the next step to trying to get to humanity,
Right.
to be able to communicate. So I'm going to make this and put Gulaski in it and see if I can communicate. The problem is that I think what the WoW didn't take into consideration is that by taking an exact copy of Gulaski, well, it's still Gulaski.
Right. You can't
It's
control
not the WoW.
that.
Yeah.
Right.
So, which I think is, anyways, we'll play this.
Okay.
So again, we got Imogen. She's doing her thing.
Yeah, she appears to be okay now, I guess.
Oh yeah, in this scene she's fine. At this point, she hasn't had any seizures yet.
Is this the Bavarian itself dissected a bit more?
No, this is that mockingbird that thinks it's Adam Gulaski that she's talking to.
Oh.
So.
Wow, this thing's just as big, too.
Tell me your name.
Gulaski, Adam.
And she's asking it questions and
Chief engineer at Kron.
and stuff. What I find interesting is that it
Marital status.
was moving, had stolen AI parts, was making motions resembling of eating and stuff, but then had started taking itself apart again. So I think it realized after it had mimicked, like after its initial mimicking, that it couldn't control Gulaski. And as we see here, Gulaski is responding to her.
Right. I think that was the WoW having a fit, trying to go, it's like, it's so close to being able to communicate itself, but because all it did was copy someone, you can't copy someone and then talk through them for yourself.
Yep. Okay.
Yep. So I think it was like, well, that didn't work, disassemble,
Right.
try again type of thing.
I just want you to tell me
Because
exactly
like
what-
any person who does experiments, well, what do? You put it all together again. If it doesn't work, you take it all apart and you start over, right?
Centimeters
So I think
isn't
that's
fair,
where it was
right?
headed. It was taking itself apart to try again.
Tell me how many
But
paper clips are
Imogen
on this table.
gets in there to do this interview with it before
No,
it
that's
takes
not
itself apart completely,
That's
or
not
has the
right
chance to
either.
take itself apart. But what's interesting is that, according to the documentation, they invite Gulaski to actually show up and talk to this thing.
Okay. Can you
How
stand
did
then and
that
tell me?
work out?
I don't feel like it.
Well, we're gonna
Why
see.
Oh, it'll happen in here. Oh, good.
Oh yeah. No. Because
No need
she's
to guess
asking it questions, like trying to gauge, like,
Okay.
whether or not it
Let's try
does it
something
know
else.
it's not human,
Right.
type of thing.
We're wanting to see how much of Gulaski a copy it really is.
Right.
Weird.
So see here, it's got a camera that's following her around. See.
On this
So here's
thing, what
Gulaski.
happened to it?
Oh.
So what, do I just start talking to it?
Yeah. Have a seat.
Now here's
Start when you're comfortable.
you got to pay attention to this, because this is the part that is kind of freaky.
All right.
Hey there. How are you?
What the? This is incredible. We look so much alike. I'm looking into a mirror right now.
Yeah, if you say so. What's your designation?
My name's Adam Golaski. That's what you wanted, right? My name. What's your designation?
Chief Engineer Adam
Talking about
Golaski.
Whoa.
this engineer. Yeah.
Some sort of jape. I'm not your man for this.
Like, he
kind of
knows everything
Funny, I
about
was just about to say
Golaski,
the same
and
thing.
Golaski's like, how the hell? Right?
So, I'm
Yeah.
supposed to believe that you're
Right.
me.
Okay. Well, he keeps going.
It's my birthday.
When's my daughter's birthday? October.
October 16th.
All right.
Wait, who
How
the
dare
fuck
you
to
ask me about my daughter?
Adam
Adam
Golaski.
Golaski, the
Busted tape deck.
How about this? Why don't you tell me something?
Let me ask you something.
Oh, this sucks.
Now, this is what were Dad's last words?
What
Now,
were
this is
Dad's last
something
words?
that
Yeah,
nobody else.
I think you're like a few seconds ahead of me.
My father's death
Oh,
record.
sorry.
No, it's fine.
That's off the rails, man.
Nobody knows about this. That it even happened. And this is something you can't just pull from the frame.
Don't let her go. He's laying there, dying, and the last thing he says to me, his last goddamn breath, he tells me to hang on to my wife.
Whoa.
Do you think
Yeah.
maybe we could do this another time?
Try changing the subject.
Yeah, that's one of those things, and it so disturbs
his experience
Golaski.
as a
He's just
relation
like,
is
I'm not doing this.
Yeah, because that's like
I'm
that's
sorry,
practically a
I'm not doing
carbon copy of his essentially him.
him. Yeah. Well, and it's information that nobody else would have.
Right.
That was a conversation that him and his dad had. Nobody else was there. It was his dad's dying words. There's absolutely no way that machine should have known that unless it was a perfect copy.
See, and that's where I have the issue of calling that a human. It is something completely different because it is a copy of a consciousness of someone that is or once was, but it has the ability to change and become something not that. Know what I mean? So yeah, it has all these memories, a form of copied conscience, which again, I still can't wrap my head around that. But and yeah, I could totally understand Golaski flipping his lid going, "Excuse me?" And the fact that both of them are right there, that's got to be mind-boggling.
Yeah. Well, and remember, at this point, most of the crew are unaware that the WoW is doing this stuff. They don't even know about Site Alpha. It's something like Site Alpha doesn't even come up on the most of the crew's radar until the whole thing goes down, where the WoW starts really having a fit over the doctor dying. And I have theories on that too.
Yeah.
So, okay, so the next one is A Beast Like Any Other.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a short story, but it talks a little bit about things that have happened prior to Jarrett waking up at Pathos 2 in Lambda.
Oh, okay.
Gavin felt dizzy. He was on the floor, inhaling the burning electric smell that permeated the area. The cold metal surface was soothing. He fought the urge to pass out. Gavin, are you with me? It was the voice of Luis Moran, a colleague and fellow field service technician. Gavin pulled himself up from the floor with effort. His muscles were sore. He looked at Moran. Her face and hair were partially smeared with structure gel. What happened? Asked Gavin. Moran's face lit up with genuine relief. She staggered across the room holding her side. Pipe explosion. Of course. We have to activate the turbo batteries. I remember. I'm not sure how we're supposed to make it. Need to get to the other side of the machine hangars to reach the battery park. There are so many robots in the way. They could all be psychotic, out to kill us. No way to know. So this is like after everything has started going to hell in a handbasket.
Right.
Okay?
This is when all the robots are starting to like take on their own agenda, apparently.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Okay, so Gavin nodded. Wasn't just the machine hangars. Epsilon was now littered with rogue machines and robots. It had been hell trying to stay clear of the erratic machines while still doing their job. Even the non-aggressive ones were a problem. Their strength and spastic movements were a perfect formula for causing disastrous accidents. So far, there hadn't been any deaths, but it was clear that it was just a matter of time. They had to find a way out of this. Turning on the batteries was the first step. We have to get the batteries activated, said Moran. I know. Then Carl and Amy will set up the automated production to keep the plant running after we're evacuated. So this is part of the team that was left at Lambda to keep basically the lights on, you know?
Yeah.
Because remember, Carl and Amy were the two that were left at Lambda last to, lock everything up, and then they were supposed to evacuate to someplace else in Pathos 2, and that they were just going to leave Lambda to the robots, but make certain the robots couldn't destroy any of the needed equipment to keep life support going.
Yeah, they were supposed to
So-
set the place up for automation. And weren't the robots technically supposed to be there to keep the automation going?
Right, but remember, at this point, they've gone nuts.
Was
Now, this
that
goes
because
back
of the WoW? Or-
Yes, but not because the WoW is evil. So because when we get into the transmissions, you'll see kind of a little bit more of like Imogen and what happens to her.
Okay.
And I have a theory about like why the WoW went nuts. Okay.
All right.
So so where was I?
I know. Get the power under control.
Okay. Okay, I know. Get the power under control, then get the hell out. Rest when we get to Theta. Moran still looked worried. She nodded and peered into the next room. Come on, let's move. Gavin followed Moran as she staggered. They moved through Epsilon's stark factory floors, climbing over a pile of dismantled universal helpers and a broken loader. It wasn't the people at Epsilon that had taken them apart. It was the insanity spreading among the robots that made them turn on each other. I'm sorry, he wakes up at Epsilon, not Lambda.
Ah, okay.
I keep flipping that up. The robots often fought, all while the screaming with maddening human voices. No one knew what made them that way. It was just another of the many calamities that had struck Pathos 2 in its sights, and it was getting worse every day. The robots at the station were powerful beasts of burden that together could move mountains, but only when working with clear directions. The robots at Theta and other sites were easily disarmed, but at Epsilon there were so many. The manufacturing plant just kept making more before it was finally shut down by the staff a few days ago. Thankfully, most of the robots produced were for underwater work and simply couldn't move effectively inside. But there were probably still 100 rogue machines walking the vast... well, my friend just noticed a car. It's pouring. Oh, well,
That
yeah,
sucks.
that sucks. That sucks. Underwater work simply couldn't move effectively inside, but there were probably still 100 rogue machines walking the vast network of corridors and halls at Epsilon, and it was best to avoid them altogether. Are you kidding me? Miron was frustrated. They had stopped in front of a locked door. She was swiping her Omni tool at the panel, but nothing was happening. What's wrong? The security profile is effed. Try pulling the tool chip and plugging it back in again. No, it's not that. Someone or something changed the cipher. Cut the power. We'll pull it open. Moran popped a maintenance panel open and started working a set of wires. Gavin stepped up towards the door and tried pulling it open. It was loose. Sparks burst from the wires as Gavin forced the door open by hand. Moran fell back against the wall as she dodged the falling circuitry. Gavin, impressed by his simple solution, looked down on Moran, who was sitting on the floor next to him. She looked shocked. Sorry, I just thought it was worth a try, he smiled. Gavin gave Moran a hand and pulled her to her feet. He'd never thought of how small she was compared to him. She must be shorter than 5 feet. Good job, she wheezed, catching her breath. They kept moving. While they were getting closer to their goal, the backup system was a giant hangar-sized hall filled with what were simply referred to as turbo batteries. The technical definition was probably something dull that didn't convey their incredible power. Fully loaded, they could keep the whole station running for months without the need for producing more power. When the geothermal plant was constructed some 40 years ago, it was not considered reliable enough to be entirely trusted, so the batteries were put in so that if power production failed, the station would not go completely dark. Over the last 10 years or so, the production had become so stable that the batteries became effectively redundant. Luckily, no one would benefit from dismantling them, so they remained unused, stuck in the oldest part of Epsilon. The sections ahead were machine hangars, largely open spaces, with literally tons of potentially infested machinery in their way. To avoid dodging between the unpredictable machines, they continued up a staircase and across the hangar via narrow walkways high above the ground floor.
All right, one sec. So,
Go on.
all of what we just read, I did notice this as I was running away from a lot of the robots and squishy monsters. They did make very human sounding noises. One of my
Mhm.
theories was on that, and I have no idea if I mentioned it during any of the streams, was what if it was a copy of them somehow got into those, either due to the WoW or I don't know, somehow they got in there, and of course they're not supposed to be in that. And much like what happened with the Dunbat, they go insane. And
I would say you are correct.
but as to why some of them look mutated, that I don't fully know why, because it looks like their structure gel just went nuts.
So the mutations that like end up chasing you at some point, like the one that was in the Curie,
Yeah.
that could teleport from place to place and like was very aggressive, or the screaming woman in the basement.
Ugh.
Yeah. So I think at some point the WoW figured out that putting the copies in the machines was not the solution, and that the solution was actually to take the humans and make them more machine.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's kind of like what's that one movie called? I want to say it's Virus, but I don't think that's it. But no, I understand the weird theme there. But yeah, so
Right.
I take it that still didn't really work in their favor though, because like they went
No, it didn't.
absolutely bonkers.
Well, it didn't work in their favor because what happened is that the only humans it could get a hold of to do this to were dead ones. So it could only do stuff with human bodies that had already died.
Gotcha. But they still had to
So-
have the black box in them or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay, which would already cause some kind of animosity between the WoW or whatever if you're finding out that they had to use the corpse of
Yeah.
someone they once knew. All right.
Yeah.
Did you want
Well,
me
I
to
mean-
read more or did
No, I got this.
Okay.
I got this. You could do the next one.
Okay.
Okay, so, have you been here before? Asked Gavin. I don't think so. Most of the stuff was built and forgotten about way before I got here. So this isn't the first crew of people who have been at Pathos 2. And Pathos 2, I mean, clearly has been here for like 40 plus years,
Right.
doing whatever it is that they are doing, which is launching shit into space. So, up on the walkways, they were able to cover a lot of ground without risking the attention of the machines. Below them, they could see container-sized loaders moving about, frustrated without purpose. Gavin and Muron spotted the entrance to the battery hall and descended a staircase leading down towards the main floor. A large UH unit ambled close to the landing. Depending upon how much they were moving, one tactic was to simply walk up to the robot, reach in between the body parts, and pull the tetracord that would instantly pacify the machine. The danger being is that if you weren't fast enough, the robot might pivot its torso and potentially crush your lower arm.
Ah.
Many of the staff had suffered various degrees of such injuries, and it had even prompted some to come up with this makeshift armor to wear on the arms. Come on, let's just rush past it towards the gate, whispered Muron, clutching her Omni tool. Wait, if the Omni tool didn't work before, we can't trust it now. You need to upgrade it, remember? I'll just take out the helper and we can work the door in peace. Okay, just be quiet. There's a lot of machines down this hall that might come running if they hear something. Gavin
Oh.
nodded and sneaked towards the UH. It was a large one, a model often called the Kodiak, as it was the size of a bear and could effortlessly switch between standing on 2 or 4 legs. He had done it a few times before, but it was always scary. It felt like sneaking up on a wild animal. Gavin looked back at Muron, only to see that she had already moved on. She was by the door, popping a panel in the floor, accessing a valve that would slowly pry the gate open. Gavin rolled his eyes at the unnecessary risk he was taking, but kept focused on the beast in front of him. The robot swayed ever so lightly as it rose and stabilized its massive weight on its 2 rigid hind legs. Gavin jumped forward, shoved his arm in between the moving parts, and tried to reach the tetracord. He didn't get it. The Kodiak swung around. Gavin panicked as the heavy machine parts closed on his arm. He pulled it out as fast as he could, using the other arm to brace himself against the Kodiak's armor plates. Before he knew what had happened, the Kodiak staggered and they both fell to the ground. He saw his chance and plunged his arm back in between the moving parts. The Kodiak screamed in a scrambled digital mess of a voice as Gavin grabbed the tetracord and pulled. The machine collapsed in a dead husk of metal. Gavin got back on his feet and clenched the tetracord in triumph. He felt incredibly lucky. He couldn't believe he'd gotten out of that. It was like dropping a live grenade on the ground and by the grace of God was able to pick it back up and throw it away before it blew him apart. Proud of his accomplishment, Gavin looked back at the gate Moran was forcing. She wasn't there. She'd managed to open it enough to slip inside the battery halls already. Gavin hurried over and screamed. I know, right? Thanks! Gavin hurried over and squeezed himself through the narrow gap Moran had settled for. Inside was the turbo battery park he had been hearing about. It was huge, but uninteresting, a collection of containers evenly spaced across the floor. Gavin had come in on a mezzanine floor, so he had the perfect view over the hall. Moran had made her way to the control room on the same floor. Gavin followed her steps. As he came up behind her, she swung around with a large monkey wrench, almost hitting him in the chest. Christ, take it easy, it's just me. Moran calmed as she realized who it was. Don't scare me like that. Me? I'm not the one abandoning their friends while they're fighting Kodiaks. Yeah, well, I'm sorry. This is important.
Wow.
Moran turned back. Yeah, I know. It's like, okay. Moran turned back to the controls and started hitting switches, booting an old terminal that seemed to have an entirely different system from the rest of the station. Can you get it running? Yeah, it's not a problem. Just keep your eyes open on the gate, okay? Don't want the machines to even know about this stuff. How can we be sure that this place won't be affected by the same crazy that the rest is suffering from? There's not a lot of artificial intelligence here. It's all very basic stuff. It shouldn't get infected.
Shouldn't.
That's wishful thinking. That's wishful thinking. By the time Jarrett wakes up, everything's infected.
Uh-huh.
But what if some robots just decide to walk in here, tearing this place apart? Let's hope they enjoy electricity as much as we do. Suddenly, the hall lit up with sharp cracks echoing inside. Gauges and meters snapped into position. Moran nodded. It's working. Gavin and Moran made their way back. With their mission completed, it was just a matter of not getting in the way of anything violent. Their long walk was accompanied by the usual strange voices and screams of the corrupted minds stuck in bodies they couldn't cope with. The danger of Epsilon wasn't just the unpredictability of the machines, but the psychological agony of constantly hearing people you knew in pain. You just had to keep telling yourself it wasn't real, it wasn't them, it's just robots. Come on, guys. The fuel chip failed me. I need a security update, yelled Moran as she banged the door leading into the nest. The door opened. Moran quickly entered and Gavin followed. The group inside were familiar, but there was something wrong. There was Chief Factor Jane Addams, of course, Carl, Amy, Shank, Jonesy, Rogers, and Gavin. Get the Tetra, quick. Gavin didn't understand what was happening. Carl leapt towards him and sank his arm into Gavin's stomach. Where was the blood? What are you doing? Asked Gavin in shock. Who is that? He pointed towards the other Gavin. Got it, almost. Carl pulled a cord from Gavin's stomach. It looked weird. Gavin couldn't move anymore. He was getting really scared. He looked to Moran. She was avoiding him, trying to look away. Moran, what's happening to me? It's okay, man, answered Carl, and reached back into the stomach. It'll be over soon. Gavin couldn't make this scene into anything believable. What the hell was happening? The people in the room looked uncomfortable, disgusted even. Moran was in tears. The other Gavin looked rigid with stress. Just kill it already. That can't be right. I just helped out with the plan. We were getting out. I'm the real Gavin, right? I have to be. I am me. I'm Gavin Finley, field service technician stationed at Epsilon Pathos 2. I'm a real person. I am...
And you see? That right there already tells me quite a few things. They themselves realize that it's not exactly human. It is nothing more than a copy. They actually acted just like how I know for damn well how they will act if there is a sequel, and assuming that there are humans that manage to survive on the cometed planet. This is exactly what will happen.
But what if it ends up like Battlestar Galactica, though, where they don't know?
Or kind of like, I want to say it was the first Alien movie or whatever, where they have androids that are so human-like. Even their internal stuff looks so like Origins.
There were androids in both the first and the second Alien movies.
I don't know if I watched the second one. I know I watched the first one. But, or, I don't know. It was the one with the chick and the one guy called her a walking toaster or something. Whatever one that one was. It's been so long since I've watched Alien. I've got some homework to do. But I digress.
Yeah, clearly.
So, that... How did they get a body to look exactly like Gavin, then? Is that just more of the gel?
I don't think it did look exactly like Gavin. I think that's why she was so nervous with him and so, like, or... I don't think that... I think what happened is they knew that it was going to be sensitive. So when they came across one of those robots that was like what Jared ended up being.
What if they did that on purpose because they knew they needed Gavin's wits for whatever the hell was going on? So they borrowed a copy but knowing that they were going to have to put it out of commission or something once they got to wherever the hell they were. So they used it as a tool.
Well, I do believe they used it as a tool, but I don't think they're the ones that created it.
Okay.
I think it was another WoW copy.
Brooke asks, is it kind of like Detroit Become Human in a sense? I still haven't played that, so I don't know. I have the game. I will play the game. But I'm gonna say maybe? I don't know.
I don't know. So...
That's... I mean, but again, like... I don't know.
Well, remember, Simon didn't know that he was not human, that he was in a robot form.
Right.
Until, like, until later. Until basically after everything caved in at Lambda, and he was breathing underwater. Like, clearly that wasn't a thing.
Like, that's quite a shock. And...
Right.
I don't know, there's just so much I want to add to that, but I'm just going to be repeating myself. Alright, let's go to the next one. Item 4520, the coin flip. Let's see. Alright, Peter Strasky, I keep messing up his name. I didn't know if you had played it. Thankfully, I didn't go into more detail, which I appreciate, because I do intend to play it. I've heard mixed things on the game, just depending on who you are, but I will play it. Peter Strasky felt nervous but excited as he entered Catherine's scan room. It was a remote control station that had been refurbished into a brain scanner. Catherine was using it to save digital copies of the people at Theta and put them into a digital realm dubbed the Ark. The idea of saving your mind digitally had been discussed at great lengths during the last few weeks. To many, it simply seemed unnecessary. Why would you need a digital copy of yourself? It wouldn't physically be saving you in any way. It was nothing more than a fancy photograph. This I agree with, but that's just my own opinion on it. The usual counter-argument was simply, why not? It was such a small sacrifice to sit down in a pilot seat and let Catherine flood your brain with electromagnetism for a few seconds. If anything, the copy of the brain would be incredibly happy and could possibly live on for an eternity. It would be like sending off your twin to live in a paradise. The ARC project drew so much attention that surveys were circulated to determine how the staff actually felt about it and how the project should be shaped if it was to be completed. People got increasingly invested in Catherine's pet project, and before she knew it, it was decided that this would be Theta's last official effort. Sorry. If the human race was about to go extinct, as it decidedly seemed to be doing, then the last people left alive would leave a token to be remembered by. This digital realm, the Ark, would be a perfect way to preserve the qualities of being human. Again, how I phrased it, as it just being, like, a fancy storybook. Or at least that's how I've always viewed it. A cool thing should there be a future generation, whether it is more humans or maybe it's a brand new race that winds up on Earth. Like, this would be like, this is what once was on that planet so many years ago, is kind of how I look at it.
Right.
As Strasky entered, Catherine was at the computer looking at cluttered screen full of graphics and graphs and numbers. Hi, Beb. Welcome home. Goober. Hi, he said. Catherine's chair swiveled around to face Strasky. He instantly smiled, not just because they were friends, but because Catherine always seemed to look slightly baffled with her eyebrows raised while she was deep into her work. It was one of Strasky's favorite things about Catherine, and it made him laugh almost every time. Strasky, how are you? Said Catherine and smiled. Nervous about the scan? How's the project going? It's going well. The world is improving with every scan I add. Easier to tweak when there are product testers that can tell me what's wrong. Can you talk to the people inside the Ark? I try not to. Not directly. It's more like observing, reading data. I'm not spying on them or anything, just the stats. Do you want to get going with the scan? Not really, but I guess I have to. You don't have to if you don't want to. And sit out the greatest show on Earth and beyond. I heard we're launching it into space. Yeah, I don't like the idea of just leaving it down here. It's a piece of technology after all. The WoW could get to it too easily. Really?
Oh, I have thoughts on that too. I have a theory on that too. But go on.
What are you showing me?
Smell it.
I did smell it.
You smelled the top. You weird on the plastic.
It comes out from the bottom. I can smell all of it.
Good.
It smells good. We're doing a thing.
Stop doing a thing.
Go away.
No.
I love you, bye.
No.
Let's see. Hang on.
Really? You're blaming the WoW?
Really, you're blaming... Yeah, okay. I thought you said that was like blaming evolution for killer sharks. You know what I mean. It's just a shorthand way to refer to all the madness that the WoW spawned. You have to be careful about that. I've heard people talking about the WoW like it was a god or something. That is actually controlling robots and machines to get to us, to kill us all. It's hard to know what people actually mean when some people take it literally and some think of it like shorthand. Sorry, I'll be careful in the future. Did you want to have a seat? I was actually hoping on stalling some more. Strask, there's no need to worry. It doesn't hurt. It's not that. It's what comes after. Catherine's smile dropped. She knew what he was referring to, but didn't know how to properly handle it. It'll be fine, she said quietly. Just don't get your hopes up. Strasky walked over to the mechanized seat and sat down. He had never had...
Hold on. What she's referring to here is Strong's continuity. Remember how Strong said that, it was a coin toss, that whoever, couldn't guarantee that you'd be the one that would end up on the Ark. So that was why he was telling everybody to kill themselves after they came out of the scan, so that it was perfect continuity.
What are you doing? Yeah.
Phoenix! Hush!
No, yeah, see, which, later in the game, we prove that that's not the case, but I think even Catherine herself knew from the start that...
she knew that Sarong was completely full of it, but Sarong was basing his continuity belief also on his personal philosophies.
But that's not fact. Philosophy and fact are completely different.
No, it's not. But unfortunately, because he was such this learned scientist and presented it in a scientific way, it's kind of like the whole vaxxers versus anti-vaxxers thing, because it was promoted that vaccines cause autism in one scientific document by one doctor who lost his license, had been pulled before the board for the ethics committee multiple times for screwing up, and then the paper was retracted because it was based on falsified evidence. But because of that one doctoral thesis document, there are still hundreds of thousands of people today that believe that vaccines cause autism and other genetic disorders, and therefore we have this whole slew of people that are anti-vaxxers because of one falsified document. So that's how it is with people, unfortunately, is you get these people in positions of power with doctoral degrees and stuff, and they make a pronouncement about something, and the masses, because they don't know any better, just go along with it.
So that's what happened here.
Yes, that's what happened here.
Gotcha.
Even though Catherine knows better, because Catherine's also a doctor, but she's the quiet, non-confrontational type,
Yeah.
So she's not going to argue with anybody who believes. She's not going to argue personal beliefs.
But did she at least fully explain that it is nothing more than a copy? It's not you going up there?
She tried, but remember how it was when she kept trying to explain it to Simon?
True. She's not much of one to really really
Well,
fight her voice on something.
mm-mm. No, she doesn't. She's not a fighter.
Gotcha.
She's a fawn or freeze. That's how she handles conflict. She does not have the backbone to fight stuff. Whereas Sarang was, and I also think Sarang also was kind of like more recognized as a doctor, you know? Whereas Catherine, while she was a doctor, was, because she was always playing with the machines, I think there was a level of, it goes back to that judgmentality type of thing, you know? Whereas some doctoral degrees are looked down upon because they're not whatever. You know, I mean, you see it even in
Yeah.
today where you've got physician's assistants versus physicians, and there's still those group of people out there like they don't want to see the physician's assistant, even though most of the time the physician's assistant is far superior in knowledge and expertise than the physician. You know,
Right. Okay.
so go on. All right.
Yeah. Let's see. We gotta just don't get your hopes up. Strasky walked over to the mechanized seat and sat down. He had never had the opportunity to use one of the pilot seats before. They were usually handled by construct wranglers and field service technicians to remotely control complex machinery and robots. It was a firm seat, but still comfortable, certainly made to accommodate countless of hours of work. So, okay, so you mentioned this earlier where they were able to use the pilot seats to control the robots and stuff. I'm wondering if that's how the robots were getting, like, copies of people. Maybe it... Because you know how
Yeah.
with computers, even if you erase something on there in its like hardest of wires and whatever, it still has the information somehow.
Yeah, unless it's really uber wiped.
Right.
Possibly, but they do state in the game that the WoW had been stealing brain scans for a while.
Oh, okay.
Because part of that interface of the pilot seat is the black box. And so, like, whatever the pilot scanning technology is in the pilot seat that helps the pilot to sync up with the robot, so that it's much in VR, it's much like VR.
Oh, okay.
So where in VR you've got the paddles, and the paddles are controlling your hands in the virtual reality. It's the same thing with the pilot seat, where your brain is basically jacked into this. The pilot seat helps to act as a jack in for the robot.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay.
Let's
Okay.
see. Accommodate countless
Alright.
hours of work. Put your head back, please, all the way back to the cushion. The seat started powering up, leaning back ever so slightly to put the pilot in the perfect position. The helmet came down and blacked out Strasky's vision. Catherine, is it supposed to sound like that? Everything's fine, you'll see some flashing lights. The blackness bursted into a kaleidoscope of colors and shapes. A high-pitched buzz drowned out the soundscape. Strasky didn't feel any pain, only a quickly receding fear. Getting past the initial fright, he felt the rush of a roller coaster ride. Just as it started to race, it stopped. The sound quickly winding down, the screen clearing up in front of him. Strasky chuckled as the helmet came off. Then the rush of excitement faded, and he started to realize what had happened. He sat up in the seat and looked over at Catherine by her computer. I'm here. I'm sorry, Strask. He didn't get the grand prize. He tried to stop tears pooling in his eyes by quickly wiping at them with his sleeves. I lost the coin toss, he said quietly. Nothing's changed. You're still here. How's your head? I got painkillers, antacids, and other stuff. Strasky didn't feel queasy, but it wasn't anything he couldn't handle. Besides, he was too occupied with the thought of still being here. Thank you, but no. I'm good, I guess, so we're done, right? He tried his best to push away his feelings. Yes, your scan is completed, but you can stay if you want. Just doing one scan per day, anyway. No, I should get back to work. As he stood up, he almost fell to the floor and found he was crying. God damn it, I really wanted to go. Can't believe I have to stay here and die with the rest of the losers. It's so unfair. This was the way out. We were supposed to be saved. Jesus Christ. Catherine looked sad, shell-shocked. She probably had no idea how to deal with people like this. He wiped his eyes. You don't happen to have enough pills to kill me, right? No, just to make you really sick, she answered, disapproval in her eyes. She turned her computer and got back to work. Strasky collected himself, wiped his eyes clean again, pulled his hand through his hair, and took a few deep breaths. He looked at Catherine, but there was nothing to be found there. She had turned cold and distant. Well, thank you, I guess, he said and opened the door. Just as he was about to leave, Catherine said, Don't do it, okay? Strasky exhaled and smiled back at Catherine. Don't worry, you guys aren't getting rid of me that easily. Let's see. Before his site was evacuated, Baxter Rogers used to work with the Upsilon thermal plant. What he liked about it was that it was a difficult job. It blended his engineering expertise with a good amount of gut feeling. The plant producing electrical power for all Pathos 2 was huge, fueled by geothermal heat emanating from molten rock beneath Earth's crust. It wasn't complete madness, there were calculations and measurements, but in many ways it was like placing a power plant on top of an active volcano. That sounds absolutely insane. Rogers was the human eye that kept the computerized systems in check. He lived for the responsibility of deciding how to channel heat through the partially natural, partially artificial flues that reached into Earth's core. There were 2 recent incidents that had affected Rogers' current mood. Site service engineer Heather Walches had handed over his plant responsibilities to the station-wide artificial intelligence, LAO, which practically relegated him to pure maintenance assignments. And then there was the Upsilon evacuation. He could understand the reasoning. There was no real point in keeping all of Upsilon active. After the comet took out the surface, there wasn't much use in keeping the gas harvesters or the manufacturing lines running. All of that only made sense when Pathos 2 was still on active satellite launcher. When Rogers arrived at the Theta, he realized he wasn't as much out of a job as he was a refugee. There was nothing to do except to hang around the site. He knew supervisors gave him as many assignments as they could, but the truth was that Theta was a well-oiled machine. The people from Upsilon were mostly in the way, and it only got worse as they evacuated Delta. Rogers could feel himself becoming worse as a person. He was bitter and jealous of the people who still had a sense of purpose. He tried to stay strong, to remain focused on being helpful and kind, but it wasn't always so easy. Yeah, especially in a situation like this where the whole world has just kind of quite literally gone up in flames, you would need something to keep yourself preoccupied. Otherwise, yeah, you're absolutely gonna go insane. Even without the whole brain scan stuff going on, if you don't have something like some kind of purpose, I could foresee someone becoming very bitter and, eventually going mad.
Yeah.
Alright, Brooke, enjoy your dinner. Share some with me. Let's see, evacuated Delta. Nope, I already read that. Let's see. Rogers entered Catherine's scan room without as much as a knock. Unfazed, Catherine stared at her computer screen. Rogers took a deep breath, trying to keep centered. He didn't care much for Catherine. She was weak. He had always felt strongly that she should have been locked inside a room while the real people deal with the complex aftermath of this dying world. But no matter how much he disliked her, she had somehow been able to give everyone a second chance, an eternal life inside a digital paradise. Get a scan, and you would have a chance of waking up in a world without trouble, so they said. Hey, I'm here for the scan, he said. Catherine looked at her calendar and checked his name. Okay, she said with a forced smile. Yeah, so I just sit in the pilot seat? Yes. Roger sat down, trying to get comfortable. You have to lean all the way. Yeah, trust me, I know. I've used a pilot seat before. You just make sure this thing doesn't blow up or anything. Blow up? Heard you're cranking it up so much it makes the black box vibrate, making people sick, giving them headaches, shit like that. I got some medicine for after. Medicine? I think a mop would be better. Catherine went silent and pressed a button. The helmet came down, closing Roger's vision. Do I need to do anything, or is all this remote? It's automated. Alright, let's roll. I just have to... You are Baxter Rogers, right? Yeah, but no one fucking calls me Baxter, so you better not start. You are from Delta? Are you for real? Isn't this shit already in the computer? I'm from Upsilon. Sorry, found you. Catherine started the process. Rogers braced himself as the electromagnetism shot through his skull. It was making him sick, but he was set on not letting it get to him. Rogers fought the experiment, snorting through his clenched jaw. Finally, the machine wound down and the helmet came off. Roger sat up, retching. He managed to hold back the vomit and ended up spitting over his clothes. He wiped his mouth with his sleeve. Huh? Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'd imagine... Okay, you mentioned it's very similar to VR. There are certain games that I can't play because something about it messes with just everything going on up here. That's quite literally the same experience.
I have games like that too, and things like that too. Like when you were playing Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, I think yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
And the spell where it's flipping things over.
Oh my god, I hate that.
Like I just can't. Yeah. At all. And so yeah, no, I absolutely Like, there's just some things I don't ride. Like, I don't do amusement parks for that reason too. Like, I just can't. It's
Right.
like too much.
I can do amusement parks, but like for some reason in video games, and I don't even have to be in VR. If I get flipped upside down, I'm a mess. So that's why in Astroneer I freak out so bad. It's because like my everything is so messed up. It's like, what do I do? But okay.
I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. Let's see. Delta, we found
That's
you.
what
Finally, the machine wound down. Rogers wretched. Okay. He managed to hold back the vomit and ended up spitting over his clothes. He wiped his mouth with his sleeve as he cursed. That's when it hit him. He was still here. Short straw, huh? He said, slowly shaking his head. Catherine avoided his gaze, trying to look busy with the computer. It's not the fucking Ark, is it? Catherine held her breath. Is it? He yelled. No, it's not. Pretty fucked up, isn't it? You're pretty fucked up. You get people excited about your salvation. Let's all live happily ever after in a paradise. It's such a fucking lie. Roger stood up, lumbered over to Catherine's desk and grabbed her teacup. He gargled a sip of her tea and spat it back. He looked at the model on her computer screen and nodded. Is that me? Yes. I can't believe people are killing themselves over this shit. You know who should kill themselves? You. I mean, you believe in this, don't you? I never said... What, you're too scared to follow your own bullshit? You just enjoy seeing other people die? That's it, isn't it? Catherine's eyes welled up. She looked petrified. Rogers finally realized that he was being an asshole, as ever. It kept happening, especially when faced with a punching bag like Dr. Catherine Chun. He stopped himself, searched for a way out. He should have apologized, but his frail sense of self wouldn't allow it. He put down the spoiled cup of tea back on the desk and cleared his throat. Good luck with your project. He left and never spoke to Catherine again. In a situation like this, like, I totally understand her, personality type, but I feel like with something as important as this, so there is not mass hysteria, mass misinformation, and or mass confusion, that she can even put it in writing if she has to.
She has, at this point in these scans, and it's not as clear as it probably could be in the documentation, but at this point she has tried everything to get through to the crew that it's not, she's not magically sending them via some kind of light circuit from one location to the next. She's making a copy, and she's told them that repeatedly. But unfortunately, because everybody's on this we're all gonna die kick, right? Because, well, that's what's happening. It's the end of the world, right? And they're so desperate to hold on to any hope, any possibility, that they have built this thing in their head.
I got it. They're treating it like it's Tron.
Yes, exactly.
That's exactly what they're thinking is going to happen. They think it's going to happen like Tron.
Yes.
Wow.
And so, even though she's tried, and because Catherine is so anti-confrontational, there's nothing she can do. Furthermore, Catherine is not the type of doctor that is trained to deal with trauma. Realistically, who should be there with her, helping her through this, and helping the crew through this, but clearly there was nobody on staff for this, was a psychologist, psychiatrist, or therapist. Somebody that was trained in dealing with trauma and drama.
Right. Well, and people in general, because Catherine doesn't really come across as a social butterfly in the least.
No, she's a doormat. So, she is a doormat. She's not a social butterfly. She struggles to make friends because humans are complicated creatures. You know, machines aren't. That, you know, there are a series of codes and numbers and whatever, you know, and I can understand that to a point. You know, we don't know, unfortunately we don't get a lot about everybody's backstories in this, but I remember one of the things that you were talking about when you were going through the game. You're like, I don't like Catherine, she's so cold, and everybody says that, and I'm like, and I think it's because of my unique life experiences where I suffer from PTSD, I suffer from depression, I suffer from anxiety. I can look at Catherine's behavior and go, that is a PTSD. She is responding from a place of PTSD. She is responding like somebody who has PTSD. So at this point in the game, that what she's like, when we're watching her have these little meltdowns, you know, where she's petrified and she's scared and she's crying and she's upset and she keeps going into this cold and distant thing. This is some of the, psychologically, this is some of the first things that you see in people who are starting to develop PTSD. And I can say, for somebody who has it and has experienced it, this is exactly what I went through. Like, almost to a T.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So, it just, because you kind of get to this point where you have to force yourself to function, you know? And so you go into kind of this cold, almost like an automaton type of state, you know? And so when you get to the point where you get tired of crying all the time,
Yeah.
so you just kind of like, like everything becomes a routine, you know?
Yeah, it's a point beyond numb.
Yes.
Yeah. So it doesn't change the fact that I was still incredibly sus of her, but not for what I thought was going on during the game. Like
Right.
it was. I didn't like her because I was like, "There's something she's not quite telling me, and I don't know what it is," and that always bothers me from people in the first place. But and she didn't turn out to be the baddie that I thought she was. I thought she was
Right.
along the levels of what was his
Like
name?
she was the ultimate bad guy and we were going to be hoodwinked at the end.
Yes, that's what I thought was gonna happen, and I'm really glad they didn't use that cliched trope.
No, when there is a secret file in the SOMA files. I know.
Ooh.
And there's a code floating around on the internet, but you can actually get it if you meet certain criteria in the game. They give you sections of the code.
Oh.
But there's a secret file in the SOMA files, and there's other YouTubers that have covered it very, very well. So if you're very interested in those, let us know. I can definitely link you up to those videos. Because I don't think that we would do it justice because other people have been there before.
Right.
But there is this secret file, and in the secret file, there's actually a partially playable prototype of the game where it was a completely different storyline that ultimately they had planned for Catherine to be the big bad at the end, like to be hoodwinked by her. Yeah, and that Catherine was far more sinister, and that there was more going on. So, like you, I'm glad that that's not the direction that they went. That's not the trope that they went for, because it has been very much overdone in science fiction.
Right.
The computer that goes crazy, or whatever type of thing. Where we do have kind of this computer going crazy, but they don't outright say why.
Right.
So. As far as Catherine and not disclosing everything, I think she got to a point, especially because of all the suicides. I think she just got to the point where it's like she knew she wasn't going to convince anybody that this is not, that it's hope, but it's not the type of hope that they think it is.
Right. She's not going to take their physical body and put it somewhere else.
Right. And so I think she just kind of got to the point where she's like, I cannot do this anymore, because you get to a point where you've explained something so many times to somebody over and over and over and over ad nauseum, and you become this broken record player of a person that you just you kind of give up.
Yeah.
You're like, I can't explain it to you. So I think when Simon meets Catherine, that is the point she's at. That is the point that she is at, because the Catherine that he meets is the scan of her that was taken. And she has learned through her, she learns as she goes through her travels, because the Catherine he encounters at Lambda is more jovial, and as the game goes on, she gets quieter and quieter and quieter and quieter and more cold and more distant, right?
Right.
Because she starts learning what happened after her first initial scan, because the Catherine that he meets is the copy that was the first initial scan, not the Catherine that died at
the last
5.
place. Yeah.
At 5. Yeah. So so she's learning what happened to her basically successor, Catherine Senior, and what happened to the crew and stuff, and she just kind of gets to this point where it's like, okay, this is what happened to my project, to the hope, to the thing that I thought was going to bring some sense of coming together of humanity, and it evolved into this giant cluster, you know? And so, and I could absolutely see that affecting her, in a very bad way. So, anyways.
Okay.
You want me to read?
Nah, this is the last part here.
Yeah,
okay.
The last part.
All right. I went too high. Okay.
Robin Bass.
Robin Bass has been intrigued with the ARC project What? When the Ark project was first brought up as a serious undertaking, it sounded almost too good to be true. Could they really load their own minds into a computer and survive the hell that Earth had been turned into? The answer to that question was a lot more complex than Bass had anticipated, but the fact was that Catherine Chen simply offered the staff to save a copy of their brain and let it live on inside a digital world that would be loaded on a space probe framework and shot into space. If anything, it was a spectacular final message from the human race before it succumbed to its dying environment, like the famous golden record aboard the Voyager in 1977.
Right, but see, at this point, Robin gets it. Like, she actually gets it.
Yeah, I was gonna
Like,
say, this is the
just
first of, like, how many people that actually understand that it's a copy. That's it. But yeah, actually, the golden record that's a perfect example of what it is that Catherine's attempting to do. It is a more or less kind of like a time capsule that is super smart, that has a potential to evolve, I suppose. I really don't know how the Ark works, but can flit about in space until it's either found or it inevitably destroys or something. So
right, it gets hit by a comet or something, or the batteries die, so to speak, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
But according to them, it could potentially be around for thousands of years, give or take. So it's like, it might be picked up. Who knows? Okay.
Yeah.
So, yeah, at least there's finally someone that gets it. What Catherine didn't foresee was that people would find so many different meanings to attach to the project. They would see it as a second life that they might join after their physical death, or that it was their metaphorical twin and that they would in some way survive in a way beyond just being information inside a complex simulation. The most influential idea was that of continuity. It started in the philosophical musings of Marc Serang. He suggested that the copy was perfect and couldn't be separated from the self. The self that was copied would simply believe nothing has changed. I got transported here. There would be nothing.
Is true. That happened.
Yeah. There would be nothing new about this copy. It wasn't something that started or activated. It was effortlessly continuing in the same way as normal. You kept moving from moment to moment. The only thing that would make you different from the copy would be your paths diverging. Exactly. Without a doubt, I do have to agree with that. It is a perfect copy. Because how they managed to get you down to, like, stuff, like what was happening with, Golaski.
Yeah, Golaski, his dad's dying breath, that memory, something nobody else knew.
Right.
Something that he had carried inside of him, you know?
Right.
Like, that's huge.
Like, a brain scan is one thing, but this copied memories down to personality, down to certain, like, quirks, tics, and all kinds of crap.
And you heard the emotion in it, too.
Right.
When the machine said it, you heard the emotion in the voice.
Right.
That was such a pivotal memory. Like, that's not the emotion, because, like, you can see, like, other people, when you describe memories to somebody, they are not feeling the feelings that you felt in that moment. That's something that's very unique to you.
Right.
So the fact that clearly it was a perfect copy, because there was definite emotion attached to that. The way he said it, he's like, you know, hold on to my wife. That these were his dying breath, like, you know. And it clearly it was conveyed in a way that the real Golaski was like, that is so true, you know.
Right.
Which is why he freaked out and ran.
Yeah, and I can't blame him. All right.
Yeah.
So when you'd spent too much time apart, you would end up as two different individuals. But for that one brief instant of copying, the you that was copied and the you that you are would be the same, not similar, but the exact same. The controversial idea that Serang proposed was that if you removed the physical original, yourself would only have one path to go down, the one inside the digital paradise. Oh, okay. So
this
what he was
explains the continuity thing a little bit better, because I don't think you understood it when you were playing the game.
Right.
This explains it better.
So his theory was because of how fresh that copy would be before it had a chance to do anything different. It is exactly you. If you were to go and kill yourself, he's thinking that the rest of your consciousness would go and just blip into the Ark.
Well, that it was already in the Ark.
Right,
Because
but
at that moment, it's the exact same. It's that both of you are the exact same person, and that there's no and that at this point there's no divergence in the timeline. Okay. Whereas if you go and you do things after the scan, well, then there's a divergence because you've got the copy that's living in the reality. They're doing their thing over here, and then you've got you, the original copy, over here living life in pathos too. So Sarang's idea was, it's like, well, if you kill one of the copies, and see, he's seeing the original as you kill the original, then the only one that's left is the copy that's inside the Ark.
right. But
He's seeing it as two consciousnesses that in one brief moment of time are exactly the same.
Right. How he's phrasing this, though, and I think is probably how most everybody else came to understand it, was that if you got rid of the original physical body, that the consciousness that is in that physical body you would be in the Ark. Yeah, it's in the Ark, but do you get what I'm saying? Like, you wouldn't be seeing through the eyes of your physical body. You would now be seeing through the eyes of your digital body. I think that's what they thought, and therefore they would remain alive or preserved or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, that is yeah, a little wackadoodle. That is,
well, which is what she goes on to say. She says the idea was crazy.
there were so many metaphysical questions that would have to be answered before coming to this conclusion. Yet it was very similar to the idea of teleportation. If you bought into the idea that breaking down your body and assembling a perfect copy somewhere else would result in a perfect transfer of the self, then the road to Sarang's continuity idea was remarkably short. The catalyst in the scenario wasn't just Sarang's argument, but that people wanted to believe in it, desperately so. Well, yeah, the world's dying, and so are they. I can understand why they'd be so desperate to believe in something like that. When Sarang successfully killed himself after getting his scan done, there were suddenly a lot of skeptics coming around. When Robin Bass finally entered Catherine's scan room, she had... Oh, wait. You know how they could have easily debunked that shit if... Well, damn, I don't know how that would work. Because if he'd already planned to do it anyways...
They could not have debunked it because that would have meant having to access the scans that were inside the Ark.
Yeah.
And as it was proven when we accessed the one scan of this to get the security cipher, there was the potential that the people inside the Ark would go nuts.
Yeah, and they didn't want that to happen. Yeah, that's where I stopped my train of thought. I was like, wait, no, we already tried that with the one guy, and that didn't turn out well. Crap.
Well, and even the teleportation idea, like, there's an interesting episode in Star Trek: The Next Generation where they go back. It's been 7 years from the time that this particular base had been evacuated, and there's this small, like, 72-hour or 48-hour window where they can go back between two storms and go in and get out the computer to find out what happened that caused everything to go south at this particular location.
Yeah, I think I've seen that one.
They're sent, Picard's crew is sent there, and they, what is his name?
It's the
his
one
second in command.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about, though.
Anyways, he's sent down there to discover another one of him.
Yep.
Because there was a teleportation accident, and so basically there was two copies of him. There was the copy that made it out safely, that had been living on these last 7 years and getting to second officer and all these things, and then there was the copy that had been trapped there by himself at that station for 7 years. Riker, that was his name, Will Riker. And so, but they, DNA tests and scientists and stuff, and the doctor's like, yeah, it's William Riker, it's a perfect copy. But the William Riker that was at the station for the last 7 years behaved marginally differently than the William Riker that was on, the ship.
Right.
Because, well, the William Riker that was on the station for the last 7 years, his one hope was to get back to Deanna Troi. So that is what kept him going over the last 7 years. Was that someday being rescued and getting back to Deanna.
Right.
Because at the time of the accident, that's who he was in love with, and that's, the thing.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I did see that episode.
So you saw that episode.
Yeah, I know what one you're talking about.
So even with teleportation, it's not foolproof.
Right. But the divergence that they're talking about is more or less just the self experiences that either the original or the copy would have, and the experiences that you have in life is ultimately what defines you as a person and just how you will live about your day-to-day life. So you the copy of you will become something, a you that is completely different. They will become their own individual. So yeah, this is really neat. Okay.
It's a neat concept in the continuity idea, but again, like Robin says, that there's so many metaphysical questions that would have to be answered, because I mean, with so many different personal religious beliefs and how life works, or the soul works, or consciousness works, or whatever, but I think it goes back to, they were desperate, like you said, the Tron idea, they were desperate to hold on to any kind of hope of basically being rescued. And so that's what they attach themselves to, is they attach themselves to this idea of being rescued, basically.
Right. Because honestly, when I first started playing the game, I will admit, one of my first thoughts was, oh, it's kind of like Tron. But not, it really is not. It's more something else. Hey, Canadian, how are you? Librarian Shweeby. Ain't that the truth? You ready to check out a book? Too bad. It's too late. Alright, let's get back to the reading. This one's almost done. Let's see. When Robin Bass finally entered Catherine's scan room, she had seen a handful of people following Sarang, believing that they too would bypass the 50-50 chance of waking up in the digital world. Robin hoped she wouldn't have to consider it. She hoped that she would wake up inside the Ark and leave her old physical body behind. Again, the Tron theory. Catherine turned to greet her, but it ended up as an awkward wave. Uni! Uni says snackies. Yay, all the snackies. Let's see. Dr. Chun, thank you for seeing me. Thank you for coming, said Catherine, with a careful smile. Have you used the pilot seat before? Every now and then. Been a while now, though. Bass got into the seat and took a deep breath. You have to lean back. Just give me a minute. It doesn't hurt, said Catherine, smile reassuring. I heard. It's the coin toss I'm nervous about. I really want to end up on the other side, you know? Oh, wait, I thought she understood that it wasn't like that.
We did, but at the beginning, but then now, because of Sarang's theory, it's... Yeah, so, like, it goes back to humans and their weirdness of holding on to hope.
Gotcha. Okay.
When you feel, when the chips are down, you feel like you have nothing else to hold on to, even though somebody else's theory is so far-fetched, there's still that one part of you that
right
hopes,
it's like you see the logic, but you can only hope so much for the other thing.
Lies do not become you.
Oh, bull, you're super gorgeous. Don't even start. I'm going back to reading now, just
when I was
just
younger,
stop you.
but sure.
Lies and slander, I don't want to hear it. Alright. Okay. They sat in silence for a moment. Bass breathing carefully. I wish people wouldn't think of it like that, said Catherine. Can't blame us for hoping. Catherine sighed, exhausted by what she knew would happen. Okay, let's do this, said Bass, and leaned back in the seat. Catherine started the process, and the helmet came down. Bass tried to control her breathing to minimize the nauseating effects she had heard about. As the machine wound, Bass found herself whispering out loud, please, please, please. Catherine turned her head towards the computer screen to avoid facing Bass as the helmet lifted from her vision. No. Bass buried her face in her hands. There was no holding it back. Bass was devastated. She sat there for what seemed like a lifetime, just crying her eyes out. When she finally looked up, Catherine was curled up into a ball in her chair, trembling. I'm sorry, said Bass as she got up from the seat. Can't be easy seeing all your colleagues breaking down. Catherine exhaled as a tear fell down her cheek. They all lose. Before Sarang, everyone was happy, laughing it off. There was no way to get inside the Ark. Now everyone is hoping they will be the one to continue into the paradise. Now all I see is disappointment. That's awful. How can you stand it? Catherine paused, struggling with an answer. Because it's important. Bass walked over to Catherine and hugged her. Catherine resisted at first, but then gradually Bass felt the tension leave her. You are important, Catherine. You are. Bass let go of Catherine, hoping she had done more good than bad for this frightened child that was trying so hard to save mankind. Never give up, Dr. Chun. And with those final words, Bass left the scan room and headed back to her quarters, where she put a razor to... Oh, that's right. That's right. She didn't stay. Was that in hopes of the continuity thing, or was it she just couldn't take it?
Well, I think it was a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B.
Ah.
Because there's a... I don't talk about this often, but it's important.
Okay.
As somebody with depression, I am not going to say that suicidal ideation has not happened. I have attempted multiple times down through the years of my life, not in recent years, because I'm now getting better, excellent health care, and I'm in a happy, safe relationship. That makes all the difference. Never settle, people. Never settle. If that's the one piece of advice I can give anybody in the younger generation, never settle. If you have red flags in your relationship, run. Just don't waste the years.
Yep, because you can't get those years back. That's
Nope,
your
you can't
life
get
you're
those years
messing
back,
with.
and you can't get your sanity and your peace and stuff back. Did we beat SOMA already? Yeah, we did, Uni.
Yeah, that was the previous stream.
Yeah, but as somebody who has dealt with times where I was so depressed that I attempted, you get to this breaking point mentally where you just feel like there's nothing else, and that you are in so much emotional pain that you want the relief of a release. And so and so yeah, I could absolutely see that that's where Robin was at, and that despite the fact that she knew that Sarang's continuity idea was bullshit, she still secretly hoped, because there is no, at this point in this game where they're at, there is no hope.
Right.
I mean, there's nothing. The planet is dead, and we saw at the end of the game where it does the flyover of what's left of the planet. The planet is dead.
Right.
The comet has destroyed it.
And I honestly couldn't blame a single one of them for choosing that way out in the first place, because quite literally, the planet is dying. All they have left is a digital copy of themselves. Cool. But for their physical selves, they really don't have a whole lot of resources. They were going to starve to death. They were probably going to get killed to death by the crazy robot machine thingies. And if this is one final shred of hope, sure. I can't blame a single one of them for taking the out that they did, because I couldn't even guarantee that I would have stayed that long either. I feel like I would have just said, you know what? Clearly humanity was meant to say goodbye. So, I can't blame a single one of them. Uni says, I miss so fucking much. I've already worked 30 hours since Sunday, and I had yesterday off. Aw, Uni.
Well, the previous SOMA stream was a couple of weeks ago, actually.
Yeah, 2-3 weeks ago, give or take.
Yeah. We've been meaning to do this, but unfortunately our schedules just did not work out one way or another.
Yeah.
Things kept happening. I blame Mother Nature for the last one.
Yeah, because the last time we tried, I don't know if it's because of the hurricane going on, or if we just have, like, a beacon for all of the thunderstorms to just hit this house. That's what's happened the last few times. Actually, last week, I think it was Friday, I couldn't stream because the power went out, so, yeah.
Yep.
All right.
So,
are we ready to move on to the next one?
Goodbye, Mr. Munchie. So we're going to find out a little bit more about Munchie. Professor David Munchie struggled to fit the last of his many framed diplomas into the cardboard box which had been kindly provided by his former employer, Dartmouth College. He pushed aside his Newton's Cradle, a gift he had received many years ago from some organization he'd forgotten the name of, to fit in an oversized frame. He sighed out the frustration, wondering why he even wanted to keep them. Why would an old man need a framed piece of paper telling him what field he was once relevant in? So this is him at the end of his life.
Was this the guy that scanned Simon?
Yes. So when we meet Munchie, he is on his way to becoming a doctor, and that it was this doctoral thesis, the scans, with him and his co-part, that was their doctoral thesis, that they were working on to get to their doctoral, or to get their doctorate.
Gotcha.
So this is him at the end of his life. He's been a doctor, and then he becomes a professor, is teaching at Dartmouth, and now he's retiring. Okay, so that's where
Oh.
we're at at this. Okay,
Okay.
so this is well after Simon's dead, but well before Pathos too. Okay.
Oh, okay. So this is after the. That's right, because we did hear some kind of voice thingy where he was actually talking to Simon, and Simon had unfortunately
Hmm.
passed away. Okay, so I know
Well,
where we
yeah.
are. So yeah.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
So, needed a framed piece of paper telling him what field he was once relevant in. He tried to imagine himself looking at it in a year or two. Would he feel pride, perhaps confidence, by being reminded of his lifelong occupation? Or would he grieve for it? It was too early to decide, he thought. He would need to keep the damn thing. He would need to keep it all for a while, at least until he grounded himself in his new life as a retiree.
Hmm.
Munchie sat back in his old chair and looked around the room. The shelves were empty. He'd been taking home a couple of books every night to avoid needing to carry them all in one go. Very ideal, because carrying books is a bitch.
Mm-hmm.
The computer he'd been happy to leave behind. It was one of those highly secured ones that was constantly being monitored and backed up. David didn't like it at all. Let me finish my thoughts before you read them, he would say to anyone who would listen. To most people, it was second nature, and they would dismiss it as the words of an old man fighting back against his own age. The one thing David would miss about his office was the view. From his window, he would watch the campus life unfold. He enjoyed watching the students go from blind innocence to adults, or at least something like it. There was a knock at the door. It was one of the janitors, Clay. Do you need any help with your things, Dr. Munchie? Thank you, Mr. Clay. David nodded towards the cardboard box on his table with the framed diplomas only halfway inside. We could send it to your house if you want. That's all right. It's just the one box. Clay picked up the box, and they both left the office. They moved through the corridors in silence, out through the main door and across the yard towards the parking lot. Clay carefully packed the cardboard box into the trunk of the car. Then he cleared his throat. You could still get one, you know. It usually takes a while. David managed to look confused. He wasn't at all. But he didn't want to acknowledge what he knew was coming. The Nobel Prize, Clay? It usually takes a while. There it was. The one reason he'd held off from retiring for so long. David was well into his 70s, and he was only now letting go. Of course. Thank you, Mr. Clay. Life goes faster when you are old. Time is measured against the years you've already spent in this world. When you have lived 70 years, one extra year doesn't seem that long. At 41, I would agree.
Mm-hmm. At
It's just
31, I
another
would
lap.
agree.
Yeah, it's just another lap around the sun, 4 seasons swiftly replacing each other. When you are young, a year can seem like an eternity. Munchie could remember being a child, hearing about some upcoming movie or video game. It's coming out in 6 months. My God, how will I ever survive? Okay, I still feel that way about certain videos.
Certain things, yeah, but now I'm also going, damn, it's already July? Jesus. So it's like I'm still caught in that
We've hit
child,
that
but definitely
halfway,
adult
yeah.
cut. Yeah.
Yep, we've hit that half-life. Time is precious, yet we so often want it to go faster. We waste it hoping that life will somehow be better later on. However, Munchie couldn't remember what it was like being really young, before one grasped the concept of time passing. Was I fully present then? Perhaps it was the only time in my life I wasn't waiting for something to change. I simply was.
Can I
Dr.
add
Munchie?
something to that real quick?
Sure.
Okay, so this is gonna sound incredibly cute. When I had just moved to Virginia Beach, so I was about 6, turning 7. Our brand new house or whatever. I still have this memory to this day of like being super young and couldn't wait to grow up, as most kids do. And I had this thought of, would I recognize my room? Would I know where the light switch is? Would I know what this is? Would I know what that is? So I started leaving notes and stickers around my room explaining what everything was, in case something about me changed so much when I got older that I wouldn't know what the thing was because I was now an adult. Yeah, that's what my 7-year-old mind did.
Wow.
Yeah.
You were probably one of those kids when you finally realized the counter was so much shorter than it really was. Like, it boggled the mind.
Oh, yeah.
I remember that as an adult walking into, my childhood kitchen and going, when the frick was the counter ever that short? When was the cabinet ever this small?
Yep.
Like, you just, like, when it finally hits you, you're like, whoa.
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Okay, you're fine. No, it's good. Dr. Munchie, David realized he was lost in his own thoughts. How long had the young man with the newspapers been patiently waiting for his answer? David looked around his living room. The new furniture he had bought last year still looked dull. It was the lighting, wasn't it? Do you want to take a break? Asked the young man on his couch. His name was Andrew Mackerel, and he was trying his best to find a story among Munchie's scattered thoughts. No, let's continue. You were asking about Simon Jarrett. You mentioned that bringing him back to life led to the development of the artificial intuition. That he was your motivation to basically change the world of robotics. Could you elaborate? David sighed as he recognized the quotation. It was from an interview he'd made over 30 years ago. Those words had hounded him through every interview since. Look, it's a good story. It was almost turned into a movie at one point. But the truth is that Simon was simply the first person that made me truly consider what a neurograph was. We're making these scans, not really thinking about what it was. With your partner, Dr. Berg? Yes. Paul and I thought of it like information, which it technically is, but the wording does it a disservice. It's like saying humans are just machines, or matter is simply waves. Reducing a concept, a holistic entity like that, fails to acknowledge the complex mechanisms that enables it to exist in the context of human perception. Mr. Mackerel had stopped taking notes with his small digital pad. David had lost him somewhere along the way. What is your experience, Mr. Mackerel? My what?
Expertise.
What is your expertise, Mr. Mackerel? My what? Your particular strand of journalism. Do you often write about artificial intelligence? I write human interest stories. You mean those stories about people saving cats or running a soup kitchen? We can't all be writing about science, Dr. Munchie. I'm not here to write about your work. I'm here to write about you. I want to know what makes you tick, what made you devote your life to robotics. David felt his pride fall away. Mr. Mackerel didn't understand who he was, neither did he have any preconceived notions of what his supposed narrative was. He was looking for it using old quotations uttered decades ago. Maybe this was his opportunity to set it straight. Curiosity, Mr. Mackerel. Just like any other scientist, I'm not the angst-filled doctor desperately looking for a way to bring back his long-lost friend that many seems to think I am. It's true that Simon was my first test subject. He died, and it was sad, but not life-changing. The work Paul and I did in Toronto was extensive, and there were many steps between the first neurograph and the development of artificial intuition. Mr. Mackerel was thrown. He went back to his notes. So, your work has been constant? No surprises? No surprises, David sounded confident. What about the death of your partner, Dr. Berg? I don't want to talk about Paul. David was surprised how loud he sounded. Was he offended or just frustrated? You were lifelong, began Mr. Mackerel. Work has been constant. Life hasn't. David felt out of place, uncomfortable, simply by being himself. He looked around the room, his own living room. He couldn't come to terms with his own choice of furniture. He couldn't understand why he would accept to do this interview. Who was this David, who thought this was a good idea? Who was this person who thought leaving his job would make him happy? Would you bring Paul? Would you bring back Paul if you could? What? David sounded baffled. You were saying that your work wasn't fueled by the need to bring back Simon Jarrett. I was thinking maybe you had such thoughts about Paul. David wasn't angry. He was perplexed by Mr. Mackerel's rambling thoughts and how they were able to trigger a torrent of memories and unresolved feelings, but still so utterly stupid. You can't bring back the dead. I know that, tried Mr. Mackerel. I was thinking of putting his brain into brain scan into a computer or a robot. Wouldn't something like that be possible, in theory? In its truest sense, no. There's no way to build a human. For we are a process, a continuation with greater context of a living world. You're not just your mind, but your body and the experiences of the two, in a certain time, in a certain place. Could we make a machine think it's Simon or Paul? Perhaps, but it wouldn't be them. Mackerel thumbed through his notes, peering at the wording, looking concerned. I'm confused. The post-humanist proponents seems confident that this is where we are headed, that we would replace our organic bodies with circuitry. There are many people in this world who fool themselves with promises which can't be fulfilled. Mackerel was clearly struggling. David sighed. If you were somehow able to activate a neuroscan in a way that it would continue to project the subject's subjective experience and feed it back, we could possibly sustain an intelligence that thinks it's Simon or whoever. The problem is, the mind is simply not the whole human. Think what would happen when he realizes he no longer has a body that he identifies with, and that he is in a place or a time that doesn't fit with his continuing timeline. If he didn't go mad on the spot, he would simply have to surrender to the fact that he is something completely new. He wouldn't be human, he would be a new entity thinking he was Simon.
Right.
Which is what happened.
Exactly.
So, Mackerel looked out of sorts, no doubt trying to concoct some sort of story he could hand over to his editor. It looked like he was failing. Is there something like good enough in terms of being human? Yes. But she was surprised to find himself at a loss. He wanted to confidently argue that being a little bit human was like being a little bit pregnant. It just didn't work.
Right.
True. You either are or you aren't.
Exactly. It's not a matter of maybe. You're not maybe human. You either are human or you're something else.
Well, I was thinking in terms of pregnancy.
Well,
but,
yeah, pregnancy too. You can't really be one way or the other. So, yeah.
You can't just be a little bit pregnant. You're either pregnant or you're not.
All right. That's okay. If you could be a little bit pregnant, there would be a third thingy on the pregnancy sticks going, maybe? Just a little bit.
Possibility, but it's too soon to tell.
Right. Like 25%. Check back 2 years from now. Like it's just.
God, it doesn't take 2 years to make a human.
No, I'm just saying. On the if we want to go by that logic, if we want to go by the logic of you're somewhat pregnant, then maybe it's just like you keep storing data or whatever. It's like eventually you fill up the tank and you go, okay, you're pregnant. Okay, you're human. You got enough DNA. That's how I understand it, anyways.
That's like the cheese that's actually one molecule different from plastic.
Yeah, that thing where you do the take
American
the plastic off.
Yeah.
That is the shit they make the preschool slides out of, okay?
Yeah.
They just solidified it somehow.
Oh my god. Okay. Alright, where was I? What if Simon or Paul, stuck in a robot shell, claimed to be happy? Would that mean nothing? Munchie sat quiet for a while. Rare memories of Paul expressing joy rushed through him. Mackerel continued to fumble with his uneducated thoughts. I realized he wouldn't be strictly human, but if he said he was happy and you accepted him as a being, sympathy doesn't stop at your own species. I would say I love my wife very much. I don't think a technicality such as not being human would ever stop me from caring, you know? It's not just my wife being what she is, it is what we have between us. Perhaps not everything worth preserving or transferring comes from within, but is constantly created and maintained in moments. If that was still a possibility, I don't think it would matter to me what she was. I would say that some people do have that depth of feeling for other people, but I think unfortunately, as a human species, like I said earlier, because we're still so divided on things like race and religion,
right,
that there would be unfortunately too many prejudices in the way. You know, I think the furry community would be the first to back me on this, and then the LGBTQ community. Love is love is love.
Right.
You know, but does it make it right? Well, interspecies love, like, I mean, I'm sorry.
I don't know. In this case,
humans should not be going around with goats. Like, there's that woman that's married to a goat somewhere. That's just weird. But you know, my husband and I have talked about, you know, how if, you know, reincarnation is really real, you know, if we end up in different bodies or different forms in another life, you know, would we recognize each other? Would we love each other? And we both agree that yes, that would be the case. You know, so I do believe that love is love is love. But at the same time, there's this whole thing of not everybody's going to agree with that.
Right.
You know, and societal pressure and perception, community pressure and stuff, it does play a very significant role, because at the end of the day, humans as mammals, we are not solitary creatures. We are herd creatures.
Right.
Need other humans, and this was even proven last year during the middle of the pandemic, when everything went to heck in a handbasket, and we were quarantined, and everybody was going stir crazy because they couldn't see other people. you know we are not we're not the type of species that doesn't get along with others. Even those of us that are strictly solitary. I mean, I'm very much an introvert, and I like you guys, but I don't necessarily like people. you know
I can respect that.
and so it's like I have the very few people in my life that I really will interact with and that I'm close to and stuff on a daily basis, like you, my husband, my kids, but if I was by myself all the time, I would think I'd go stir crazy. And even as an introvert, where I cherish my alone time,
Right.
because I need it to recharge, I still need that
Yeah, we
interaction.
still naturally need to see more of our own species.
Right. And so
in this case, I don't know if I would consider. Would you consider a robot copy another species? Because it is, I guess, conscious, even though that is still something that I'm solely going to stay maybe on.
And that's why I'm like, it's human 2.0.
Yeah. Because it's not exactly human.
It's not human in the terms that we are now cellularly wise. It is human in a different form.
Right.
So yeah. Okay. Munchie smiled, surprised by the young man's emotional ranting, but he wasn't convinced it added anything to his perspective. However, there was something new in the conversation. He started to enjoy it. He wanted to encourage the young man's train of thought, but it was a sensitive example to explore. And what if you had already seen your wife die? Would you accept a new version of her? I think I would. You don't think it would be selfish to replace her? She wouldn't be the real her. In body she wouldn't, but as long as her mind was sound, I think it wouldn't be selfish. We would be happy. Even if it wasn't her, it would be us. Does that make sense? Munchie smiled, holding back a laugh. Is that a childish way of looking at it? Asked Mackerel. No, not at all. It just shows how complicated it all is. Mackerel sighed and scrolled through his notes again. He shook his head ruefully. Is there anything else, Mr. Mackerel? Asked Munchie. No, I think I might just have enough to make an article. A short one, maybe? Mackerel laughed and nodded. They shook hands and Mackerel left. Munchie paced around his house excited for a few minutes and then finally grabbed a pencil and a piece of paper from his printer. He started writing Good Enough, The Limits of Being Human by Dr. David Munchie. He looked at it on the page for a while, feeling the rush of excitement going to work on something new. Then he remembered Paul Berg and that he was dead and that he himself was old without a laboratory. David let out a breath, then tossed the paper into the trash can.
Aww.
So, what I gather from this is that Berg was more than just, like, the business lab partner. I think Berg was probably his partner.
I could see it.
Is what I gather.
Or if anything, more like a soul brother. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So.
Not that I mean, I don't care either way, but it does sound like there's a lot more, instead of just friends, it's more tightly knit in a form of bond. Okay.
Okay, so this next one, so we don't have to read the whole thing. I'm just going to summarize it because we're going to start, I mean, we're winding into 2 hours
how
now.
about we'll do the full reading for these last 3 and then we'll set another stream and we'll cover the videos because I do want to give each of these a good amount of attention.
Okay, yeah, because there's just, like I told you before, there's just so much here to unpack and we haven't even begun to skim the surface.
Right.
And I feel like it's a conversation that it needs time.
Oh yeah, it's good coverage though. I'm really enjoying it. So.
Oh good, I'm glad.
Okay.
Hopefully your viewers are too.
All right. Oh, it's my turn. Okay. How to climb a mountain.
And it's Anjit
Anjit
Cosetti.
Anjit Cosetti.
Cosetti.
I'm gonna call her Annie because I know I'm gonna mess it up.
Okay.
Had,
That's fine.
okay, so Annie had been working at Tao for years. She didn't particularly like it, but the money was good and it wasn't that stressful. Her job was that of a gunner, working the Omega space gun, launching satellites and space probes. Most of her time was spent preparing for launches, making sure the payload was secure, that the casing would hold up, checking weather stats, and doing ballistic calculations. The actual firing of the gun, the one thing her title focused on, was absolutely trivial. Sitting comfortably in her pilot seat, she would, with a flip of a switch, push a ton of steel and circuitry up through an extensive tunnel lined with electromagnetics, continuously accelerating the payload to escape velocity. Every launch was an amazing feat of engineering, but from Annie's point of view, it was banal?
Banal.
Banal? Oh, okay.
That means bland or boring.
Oh, well, that sucks. She would hit a switch, hear the bombastic sounds of the payload shooting off, and then soon after she would get a video feed of the thing leaving the barrel, followed by an automated confirmation, launch successful. Then there would be a string of information specific for that mission. The launch message was generated and broadcasted by a surface platform known simply as Omega. Omega was like Phi, that it didn't have a standing staff, but unlike Phi, it didn't have any workers either. Almost every day, Annie would walk through the connector tunnel from Tau to Phi in order to work, so in a way it was populated almost at all times. Omega, on the other hand, was just a fixture point for the space gun and didn't need any supervision. Annie had heard about the Curie going there occasionally to perform maintenance or check something or the other, but to her it just felt like a very solitary and vacant space. She found herself trying to get a sense of what it was like up there whenever they launched something. The video feed that would pop up on her HUD intrigued her, and she often tried to imagine what it would be like to be up there, alone in the middle of the ocean. Had to be better than down here, right? She had been thinking about it a lot lately. It had been a year since the comet killed the planet, shot down communications between the abyss and the plateau, and activated WoW in the most devastating way possible. Annie's colleague, Stravatsky, used to say that being buried alive would be a step up for the people at Tau. At least then you knew you were dead. In the abyss, looking up at the dark water pushing down on you, you couldn't help but feel that there was light way up there, somewhere. It wasn't for you, but it did translate into a tiny amount of hope, and that hope kept from accepting a peaceful death and instead perpetuate a futile struggle for survival. Again, a very human-like thing to do. Annie had, unlike the others, given in to the idea of dying. She was no longer concerned about a life after death, since in this case there wasn't much life before death either. What Annie struggled with was to try to find an end that she could accept without feeling like a failure. What she wanted wasn't anything dramatic. She just wanted to feel something that wasn't frustration, pain, or hunger. She wanted to feel genuine in the way that she could recognize her feelings as not something that of an animal, but a human being with dignity and honor. I can respect that. She's wanting to make sure that she goes out with as little regrets as possible, and that it's in the most, I suppose the term would be humane way possible, without it being all sorts of pain and devastation.
Well, I think we all want that. I mean, we all want some kind of dignity in death. I mean, there's so much about that, though, that, like, oh God, there's so much there. Because I remember one of the things that I covered, I took a class for my communications degree on death and dying, which is not an aspect of human communication that's covered all that often, or that people really talk about all that much.
Right.
And one of the topics that came up during class was hospice. And palliative care, and how that is handled in terms of communication. The hospice nurses absolutely try to do their best to bring as much dignity and honor, and stuff to a person who's dying. But there's a lot of people who don't handle it very well. They just don't handle the fact that a loved one is slowly wasting away. And it can be very devastating and stuff. And a lot of people wait too long to get, hospice care or palliative care, because family members think that they're being disloyal by having a nurse come in, or having, somebody that's trained to come in and help with the assisting with somebody who's, on, their final days. And they think they're being disloyal, or, to their loved one. And unfortunately that leads to a lot of heartache and pain with family members. And so there's a huge push in the in the hospice care and palliative care community and stuff to try and educate more on what hospice really is. That it's not this alienating, sterile environment. That it's very, a kind of that it's a way to help bridge that last step.
That
You
last
know,
moment, yeah.
yeah, and to help bring because as somebody who's had to care for a dying parent. And a dying grandparent as well. I can tell you that having to do all of that yourself, it leaves you no time to deal with your own grief. It leaves you no time to deal with anything prepping for when the loved one passes, which um, going through probate is a nightmare.
Hmm.
Um, and depending upon the state you're in, could be even worse. So, having if you have the ability to get hospice care, it's so important, for that helping to bridge that gap so that it takes some of that weight off your shoulders that you can still be a loved family member, be with your loved one and stuff and not constantly changing the bedding, changing the whatever,
Right.
stressing out about this, medications and stuff and doctor's appointments. And so but it is something where there's this idea of dying with dignity that's so interesting in other cultures too, because I mean we talk about that in terms of like how a lot of the Japanese used to handle it. you know you think back to like the time period when the samurai was,
Hmm.
in that honor and death type of thing, and some of the other native cultures and how they handle death. And so honor and death. So yeah, I can absolutely see why she would want to find a way that is acceptable to her, especially right now when everything, like she says, it's been a year in since the
Right.
comet has
And
fallen. So for
she's
a
been in
year
the
now,
abyss
they've been
for how long?
subsisting. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
I mean, you know, the fact that they're not already starving to death and stuff, I mean, is a nod to the fact that either the WoW A was doing its job or B, their own fight to survive. But you can only live in that fight, flight, freeze, survival mode for so long before you're just so done.
right. After a
You know.
while, that hope just drains, and then you just kind of want to go, I want
Mhm.
to go out on my own terms, kind of thing.
Mhm.
Which again, I can
Mhm.
respect, especially in this kind of situation. Before I
Mhm.
continue on, I think what a lot of it is that we are no, maybe just here in the U.S. I don't know about everywhere else necessarily, but I really
True.
feel like we as people, or whether it's a society, I'm not sure, are no longer taught to let go. It's like, and
Yeah.
I lived with my grandparents while my grandfather was dying. I don't know. I may have mentioned this maybe once or twice on the channel. It's not something I really care to talk about a whole lot. I know it came up during the Life is Strange series. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I was like 12 when I witnessed that, and I didn't really grieve over it until about 7 years later when he finally passed away.
Yeah.
But I mean, granted, he chose to do what he did for reasons. It was to take care of
Right.
his wife. Totally fine. I respect the choice that he made. But the fact is
Watching him go through that was painful.
yes. So, which
Well, and that goes back to, sorry to interrupt you, but
no, you're
that
fine.
goes back to my big, like, I will die on this podium drum of mental health care. It's not something that's talked about. It's still so stigmatized in this country and in other countries. I mean, I found out because I'm an advocate for the Narcissistic Support Club on Clubhouse. And so I do work in that field where I help advocate and help kind of be there for other men and women that are going through abusive situations where they need help. I've been very lucky in that I was very lucky from the get-go and was put in touch with an amazing therapist who was trained in complex PTSD and trauma and narcissistic relationships. So he was able to help me navigate and cope and, get me through all of it. But the vast majority of people like you were 12.
Right.
That your parents should have absolutely, but they didn't realize, probably because it's not even talked about in our society, they should have absolutely put you in therapy from the get-go. Um, but it's not something that's talked about. It's so stigmatized, and as bad as it is here in the U.S., it's even worse in other areas of the world. So I'm in touch with another advocate over in Japan, and there is zero mental health care in Japan.
Oh,
Nothing.
wow.
There is nothing over there, and which is part of the reason why their suicide rate is astronomical over there. Um, they yeah, there's just it's almost epidemic levels of suicides over in Japan. And there's just no kind of, there's nothing to do with trauma. There's no counselors, there's no nothing. Whereas here, yeah, you might have to jump through a lot of hoops. You might have to dodge some suicidal, judgmental bullets, and you might have to go 3 towns over, but there's some kind of care somewhere here.
Right.
There's nothing over there. And so, we get these women from Japan that come into the clubhouse rooms and they're seeking support, and some of their stories are pretty horrific, because there's just nothing.
Right.
So,
But again,
so that's my marching drum of mental health care.
totally
Beat it
understandable.
until it's blue in the face. If you think you have something if there is something that is traumatic to you, doesn't matter if it's trivialized by anybody else, go see a therapist, damn it. There is no shame in it.
Absolutely. But yeah, no, again, I can totally understand why, especially in this case, she would want to go out as honorable and as dignified as possible. All right, let's go ahead and continue on because I still got quite a bit I got to cover. Where did I?
It was those video feeds.
Okay. It was those video feeds from the Lone Omega platform that inspired her to do what she did that day. Annie watched the last few videos generated during the final launches. The screen would shake and then pan side to side to show marker buoys on the horizon. But Annie was watching that sliver of the Omega platform that got caught in the video. There was something so inviting about it. Peaceful. That's when she realized what she wanted to do. She wanted to go there. It was a crazy undertaking. It had never been done before, and it would never be tried again. She was going to climb it. She felt herself getting excited by the prospect of making her way to the surface. It would be a one-way street for sure, but she was okay with that, more than okay with it. As she thought about it, she couldn't even consider wanting to go back into the abyss again, even if the surface was all in flames. Again, last-ditch hope. I can totally respect that. She wants to see if it can even be possible. The Omega Space Gun barrel was not a straight vertical line towards the surface. It was a slope spanning more than 5 kilometers. It was going to be a long climb. But she figured it could be done. At first it seemed like climbing inside the barrel would be the safest bet, but considering its construction, divided into vacuum-filled sections with multiple locks, it all seemed too complicated. Even if she sabotaged the gun and filled it with water, the slippery surface would make it too difficult to traverse. No. It had to be climbed on the outside. She would have to climb it like a mountain. Oh, shit. So Annie set off in her power suit, carrying 3 extra tanks of oxygen and a technician's tool belt. It was surprisingly easy to climb, but it was exhausting. The constant angle of the barrel made it feel like she was climbing the longest staircase in the world. She's gonna have some sexy thighs, let me tell you.
Or not feel her thighs at all.
This is true. She won't even have those. She'll just be walking around on nubs. She thought back on her childhood, hiking with her parents on the Tafelberg just out of Cape Town. She couldn't remember how long it would take them to cover the distances, but they did get a lot of walking done in one afternoon. The climb was long and confusing. The darkness surrounding her was so overbearing that it felt like she wasn't going anywhere at all. She focused on the few meters her floodlight could illuminate and kept telling herself that she just had to reach the next section, and then the next section, and then the next after that. After 2 hours, she could hear her suit warning her about oxygen, and she carefully steadied herself to switch tanks. In complete silence, she dropped the empty tank into the darkness below her. It was chilling seeing it disappear, like it didn't exist anymore. She didn't want to acknowledge it, but in the same way she didn't feel sad about leaving her colleagues down there. In a strange way, just like the oxygen tank, they didn't exist to her anymore. It was not a conscious dismissal, it was just the way she felt. Annie continued, and soon after the tank switched, she started to notice the tiny shift in the light around her. It was getting brighter. She almost choked from tears of happiness as she crossed into the twilight zone. Seeing natural light, even as sparse as this, was incredible, and she felt herself going quicker and quicker, rushing towards the top. Oh, and that's when she slipped. She fell and grabbed onto a metal railing meant for maintenance robots. It was weak and slim. It wouldn't carry her for long. With mounting panic, she fumbled with her tool belt, got a key for the oxygen tank, and opened one of the spares on full. I don't know why I added an extra S. The tank rocketed away, pulling Annie with it. The tank carried her up, but she was getting away from the barrel. It took careful aim and a good portion of luck. She managed to steer back over the barrel and let go of the tank. She slammed into the barrel and held on for dear life. She stayed there, recovering, for the longest time. She knew she was losing oxygen, but she had to calm herself down in order to go on. When her heart had stopped racing, she stood up and carried on with the climb. That really sucks. Like, she just kind of, like, fucked up whatever chance she may have had to actually make it up there, because she got overly excited. I can't blame her, but it's like, because of that whoosh of, like, oh, logic out the wind, excitement, she just lost an oxygen tank and has wasted a little bit of time with the one that she just switched to. Damn. Okay. After 2 hours, she switched tanks again. This time, she could clearly see the top of the mid-Atlantic ridge. She was getting there, but she didn't want to risk falling again, so she kept her eyes fixed a few meters ahead and concentrated. At length, she realized she could see structures ahead. It was the bottom of the submerged stabilizing parts of the Omega platform. She didn't know the layout of Omega, but wagered a guess that she was about 50 meters from the surface. She kept moving, concentrating on the steps ahead. The suit felt heavy as she finally pushed through the surface. The light was blinding for a moment until her eyes could get used to what she was seeing. It was a beautiful day. The blue ocean stretched as far as the eye could see. The burning hot orange sun was covered by what looked like smog or smeared clouds high above. As particles of dirt started to settle on her visor, it quickly became apparent that the atmosphere was full of dust and ash. She checked her suit's climate scanner. The air was toxic. Better not take the helmet off. Annie climbed the last meters up to where the barrel met the platform. She jumped down to an observation deck and started looking for a way inside. She cleared the dust from her visor with her hand and was able to locate the door leading inside. It was like a small oil rig, fitted with work rooms, a weather station, a couple of offices, and a small habitat with beds and a kitchen. She smiled, and with childish glee, she thought, I could live here. I could be happy here. She walked around the habitat and looked through the books and other things that someone had left there. She put her hand on the couch to feel the spring in the cushion. She wanted so badly to sit down and read and drink tea. There must be some in the kitchen, she thought, but first there was something else that she needed to do. As she stood up in the middle of the common room, she took a deep breath and unlocked her helmet. She put the helmet to the side and started to step out of the armored suit. It was warm. Too warm. But she didn't care. Feeling any kind of natural air on her skin was heavenly. Annie started looking through the drawers and the wardrobes in the bedroom. She couldn't find anything in her size, but oversized male shirts and jeans were enough to make her feel human again. Step by step, she was shedding the horrors of the abyss. She felt like herself for the first time in years. Annie coughed, and then coughed again. She knew what was happening, but she wouldn't let that ruin this moment for her. The kitchen did have tea and some pasta, rice, and other dried foods. It wasn't gourmet food, but for someone like Annie, who had been eating basically anything that the body could digest for months, this was a feast. Annie cooked it all and ate as much as she could stomach. She had a hard time keeping it all down, but her overeating just made her laugh. She was incredibly happy. Her coughing got worse. Blood stained her new shirt. Without worrying, she hurried to replace it. Time was short, she thought, and went out on the observation deck again. It was even warmer than before, but the natural sunlight and the fresh ocean wind made her want to stay there. Annie pulled a chair from the common room out onto the deck, grabbed a pile of books, and sat them down next to the chair. She brought out a glass and a bottle of whiskey she found in the pantry. Annie sat down in the chair, picked up a book of poems by Keats, and flipped through it. She didn't do much reading. She was so wrapped up in the feeling of being on the surface again. She coughed. The blood stained the book of poems. She uncorked the whiskey bottle and threw the cork into the sea. As the sun set that day over the Omega platform, Annie was falling asleep for the last time in her life. She could feel it. She knew what was happening, but damn it, was it worth it. Holy shit. Yeah? That, I think, was a very honorable and dignifying death, because she... And again, I don't blame anybody for doing what they did, because it's an attempt and a hopes of survival. But in this case, she knew that that was not going to be the case for the human race. She wanted to feel human one last time. I so respect that, and love this character for what she did, because she knew that even if she got there, she wasn't going to make it, but she was going to enjoy her last few moments doing anything and everything as humanly possible. Mad props.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't find out, like, this is the only way you find out what happened to her person, because at some point in the game, there's that list of dead, missing, so on and so forth, right?
Yeah.
And she's one of the ones that's listed as missing, whereas if you go through and you kind of pay attention to the files and stuff, hers is the only one where you can't quite figure out what happened to her body. And of course they don't know, because she didn't tell anybody she was doing this. She just hiked up the space gun and said,
So they
didn't
just
tell anybody
assumed she just disappeared.
well, they know she's missing. They assume she's dead, but they don't know what happened to her. There's no grave, there's no burial, there's no nothing. She's just missing.
Right, and there's no body for them to find, and as far as they know, her body's not being used somewhere by one of the crazy WoW things.
Yeah, and there's no way they would even thought that that's where she ended up.
Right.
Like,
because that in itself sounds crazy.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, all right. So, item 5104, pseudo-memory. Description: Archivist Andrea Suther reported a patch of extraneous data in Omicron's system 4 weeks ago. The system acknowledges WoW as the owner and creator of the data, making it difficult to simply remove. Did not believed to impact the rest of the system and was therefore has been left alone. Cameron has revealed the data to be an involved series of intervals of time, like a time span that is constantly being reconsidered. The data itself is linked to a short flash of images depicting footsteps on a rocky shore, incidental, yet pertinent. Lasky suggested it to be the WoW misinterpreting a video sequence as part of its own experience, a memory, and it's desperately trying to remember when it happened. And then there's a video.
Oh, is it because of all the scans that it's been stealing, maybe?
I don't want to reveal too much because it's in the videos.
Oh, okay. Fair enough.
So
we'll get to that.
We'll get to that.
Okay.
We'll get to that in the next string.
Right? Let's see.
And then...
Death of Sarang. Let's see. Item number 7889. Death of Sarang. Mark Sarang suffered sudden cardiac arrest after completing the project. Sarang was rushed to the infirmary, but declared dead shortly thereafter. Dr. Chun, the only other person present during the death, has been detained on suspicion of manslaughter. Are you crazy? Okay. Witness...
But, yeah. I mean, you would think so, but...
Okay, witnesses report that Sarang has been arguing for suicide as a way out. Many confirming that there was a certain logic to his reasoning. Never thought he would go through with it. Sarang's level forbids any investigation into his files or personal life. But Theta's security group decided that no company secrets or conspiracies could reasonably be considered important any longer. A thorough search of his room revealed suicide note detailing his plan. The toxicology report shows signs of cyanide poisoning, which is confirmed by the suicide note. Oh, he had to have done like the teeth thing or something.
Yeah, so you find out in the game that he had cyanide capsules in his mouth.
Yep.
And as soon as he heard the scan was done, he bit down and died in the chair in front of Chun.
Yep, because he wanted it to be... That's part of his continuity belief.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. He wanted to make certain it was as instantaneous as possible so that he could continue on in the arc.
Wow.
I'm sure... I sometimes wonder if Catherine, confronts everybody that committed suicide in the arc afterwards, after her and Simon get there, and they're on the arc, the first they go to the city across the water, right?
Yeah.
They go over there. She goes up to Sarang, just punches him or hits him. You motherfucker.
You dumbass.
but because she's so
confrontational.
She's so, yeah, I don't think it would happen, but
right.
I could see myself doing that. I'd be like, you mother...
But even then, that would go against her fully knowing that it's not the same person. But would they have the same belief though? They would had to have.
No, here's the part, and I was going to bring this up in the next stream, but I'm going to put it in your brain now for us to talk about later.
Okay.
There is a theory there's 2 Catherines in the Ark.
Really?
Remember, she already had a scan of herself in the Ark because she used herself as the guinea pig first.
Oh, what kind of... Oh! Ooh! If they do make another Soma sequel or something, I really hope it's what's going on in the Ark.
Some people believe that there's 2 of her in there, and some people believe there isn't. I'm of the mind that there isn't. And the reason why I'm of that mind is, remember at the end when the scan's going, Catherine's scan took twice as long as it should have. Because we had seen, how long those scans took. We saw at the very beginning how long the scan took.
Yeah.
Her scan took twice as long, and even in documentation, the scans it shouldn't have taken that long. So I think what happened was she used that time. Like, the reason why the scan took long was because she had to find the data in the Ark of her original scan, delete it, and then upload her new copy.
That way there wouldn't be the case of 2 scans. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was going to suggest that maybe obviously she says that she put herself in there as the guinea pig, but after the fact, most likely erased it and then, put more scans in. But yours makes far more sense.
There's a list at one point of all the people that are in the Ark, and she's on that list.
Yeah.
So I honestly believe that the reason why the scan took so long is because she deleted the original copy and then uploaded the new copy of herself.
That makes a lot of sense. Why did Simon's take so damn long? Was it because, was it the WoW attacking the thing or something?
No, I think it was because his was originally a legacy scan that had been copied twice.
Oh, no, yeah. That could lead to some data transfer issues.
Right. And I also there's some other things that once we get the videos out of the way and stuff next time I want to talk about, because there's like I said, there's so much about this game to unpack.
All right, well, we got one more item.
We got the one more item, and then we will be done for this round.
Right.
Item 8682, warning. A cryptic message stuck inside a faulty Lumar relay buoy extracted by FST Evans garblation. Message is corrupt and only partially reconstruction was possible. Broken imagery show a close-up of AM engineer Imogen Reed in a ductile suit trying to communicate. The message supposedly originated Epsilon and was briefly broadcasted on multiple frequencies. The meaning of the message is still unknown. Consider controversial, as Imogen Reed has been missing for weeks and has already been declared dead. The data security group has dismissed the message, arguing that it has been constructed, pointing out the unlikely camera position and the contradictory behavior of the subject. They're calling it a propaganda message.
What if this was the case of what happened with Gavin, and it was the WoW or the robot thing, and it copied Reed?
Well, I believe this is Reed with WoW in control. Because remember, the WoW can't control humans unless they're already dead.
Oh.
And remember, because here's the thing, and Imogen had been missing, and somehow magically ended up at Epsilon for Simon Jarrett's scan to go into.
Right. So in this case, she had to have. Well, something happened. She died. The WoW got her body, and they were like, "Oh, this is what we need."
Right. So I think this was the WoW again, trying to communicate to everybody to warn them about something.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, because of some stuff we're going to talk about next time, there's a reason why the message got screwed up.
Gotcha. And actually looking at this little video feed compared to the other videos that we watched, something about her seems very, I don't know, not her. Even with whatever it is they're trying to say in this, it looks almost like they're uncomfortable talking.
Yeah.
It seems strained.
The mouth, the person's unfamiliar with how a mouth should move.
Right.
So
Yeah, that's
yeah.
interesting. Okay. Well, I cannot wait until we start covering the videos. We will have to schedule another stream to cover all that because it took a little longer than I anticipated, but I'm having so much fun and I'm really glad that we just took the time on each bit and then just kind of gave our overall theories and understandings on stuff. This is very eye-opening, and I think out of all the characters in this, I think I can relate to Dr. Munchie the most on just how his overall view of all this is and why he did the things he did later on. And but then I have a better understanding of Catherine now, thank goodness. But it doesn't change the fact that I was still very sussy of her. And again, still really glad that she didn't wind up being the big bad. Because that's what I was like, I'm calling it, she's the big bad, she's gonna turn on us, she's gonna do something. And I am so glad that that's not what happened, because I hate it when I spoil a game for myself. So it was just a nice, like, nope, it's this now. So,
yeah. Well, oh, goodness, sorry. Well, and realistically, I mean, there wasn't really a big bad in all of this. It was just a
Not
series
really.
of
It was
unfortunate events.
Yeah.
You know? But yeah, Munchie, like, I can absolutely see him being frustrated that everybody would assume that, you know, because people want to attribute somebody's passion to another person. That's us trying to humanize things.
Right.
You know, so they don't tend to understand very well when somebody's passion is in the project, you know, in the work. And in Munchie's case, it absolutely was in the work, you know. But at the same time, I think Munchie also saw a little of what Andrew was saying, you know, because he was excited, you know, he ended that interview and he was excited. Hold on 2 seconds. Sorry, loud kids.
No, you're fine.
But anyways, I think it was you know, he saw Andrew's side of it too, because he demonstrated that at the end when he was so excited coming out of that interview, and he's like, okay, this is it. I've got, you know, I'm gonna write about the limits of being human. You know, this will be my new project, you know?
Yeah.
And then he thought about how nothing felt right and nothing had been feeling right because Paul wasn't there.
Yeah.
Because it had always been Munchie and Paul, not Munchie by himself.
Right.
And so now that Paul was gone, you know, like, the idea of starting a new project without him, just like,
it didn't have the same spark or even passion to it anymore. I think in that moment he felt truly alone. And really contemplated that conversation that he just had with Macrel, which it sucks. And I think honestly he knew, because that around that time they'd already heard about the comet coming anyways, so it was kind of like along the lines of like, why bother at this point?
Munchie and Macrel's thing happened well before the comet.
Was it?
Oh yeah, it was well before the comet.
Well, no. What I'm saying is they knew that the comet was coming, right?
No.
Oh. No. Okay.
No.
So.
No. This is just this. All of that's just a little Munchie backstory. That's all that is.
So they were just doing brain scans well before a comet was even mentioned.
Yes. So, like I said before, Munchie and Paul Berg had been doing those neuroscans as part of so, and I might be explaining this badly because I do not personally have a doctoral, but
that's fine.
From what I understand in the medical community, based on talking to friends that have gone through this, is that when you go up for your doctorate, especially in certain scientific medical circles, in science medical circles, you have to basically come up with a thesis on something, and then you have to write it all up and then defend it,
right,
in order to get your doctoral certificate. And you have to be able to demonstrate in this thesis and then in the defense of it a certain, like, you know, ethics and cognitive thinking and da 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 da, certain, there are certain
Right.
things they look for. Okay, so him and Paul Berg now were working on this doctoral thesis together, and the idea behind it was is if they could scan brains and map them out, that having those scans would be able to help brain injured victims, much like Simon Jarrett and other people, understand the brain better. Because one of the problems that they have right now with medical and science is that even though we've done all this work, we've had made all these advancements and stuff, we don't still quite understand how the human brain works very well.
I think that's
'Cause
probably where I got confused in the game itself, because
mhm,
it all kind of happened rather quickly in the beginning. So
right.
I thought, yeah, I think I just got confused timeline wise. I thought the comet was already coming and that Dr. Munchie was out to get as many scans as possible. I actually had completely forgotten that the original Simon had gotten a brain injury from the
Yeah.
car accident. So
Yeah.
so now I can
is
piece
there-
everything. So Dr. Munchie was working towards
Yes.
basically
So now,
better brain health.
yes, better brain health.
Okay.
So there's two pieces of things that you missed. So when you first go into the office and you go through the drawers to find the code for the door, there is an article in there where Munchie and Berg are talking about their project.
Ah, okay.
Okay, and it details the project. So if you take the time to read the article, it gives you more information. There's also a poster up in the hallway as you go down the hallway to your left. So there's the locked science room you can't go into. There's the poster, and then you keep going down the hall, and then there's the other room that you can go into and kind of dick around in there a little bit and look. And then there's the room at the end of the hall. Now there's a poster there, and it talks about Carthage in that poster. So Carthage was already part of the picture. They were already a corporation, but Pathos 2 hadn't basically come to life yet. Now, is there some foreshadowing of the comet? Sure, there is foreshadowing there, and there's foreshadowing in other areas and stuff. But at that point, Munchie doing the scans, and then much later him graduating from you're not graduating, but retiring from working at Dartmouth or wherever it was he was working at. I can't remember off the top of my head. They say it in there. But him retiring, all of that happened before the comet. So when the comet hits, it's like 100+ years after the original scan that Simon Jarrett did.
Okay.
So it's a long time. Like, we're talking generations.
Okay. So
damn.
Okay. Now that makes a lot more sense now. So Catherine getting a hold, or whomever rather, getting a hold of the technology and advancing in it rather, that was well after Dr. Munchie.
Yes.
Okay, I've got this all figured out now. I actually thought Dr. Munchie was right around that same time as Catherine and all them, and that's why I was like, what am I missing here? Okay, now it's all, I get it. Okay.
Well, and that's why one of the things you kind of went a little quickly
squirreled.
through, but you squirreled through, was those legacy scans, because remember in the same area when you found out that Simon did give permission for Munchie to use his scan, because there was a final scan that Munchie did, and then there was a recording, and he's talking with Simon in that recording about how he was really hoping that they would be able to fix Simon's brain injury, but unfortunately the technology was just not there yet to fix that brain injury. It was just more severe than they had hoped,
Right.
or they thought, which unfortunately that's how it goes with a lot of brain things. Boy, do I know. So Munchie, at the same time he did that last final scan of Simon, he had also done a scan of himself and Berg.
Ah.
So they had also done scans. So in the artificial intelligence technology packet, and Catherine talks about this, how it comes with legacy scans for study and for experimentation and stuff, because they were people who were long since dead, so it didn't matter.
Right.
And so Simon, Munchie, and Berg were all legacy scans, but when you go into the computer, the only one that's viable was Simon's scan, which is why his scan was the only one that ended up in the suit, and not Munchie and not Berg.
Why was it that those two weren't viable? Just too old, or?
Th- from what I understand, they were too old or they were incomplete.
Gotcha.
And the incompletion, I suspect, was probably because at the time they were trying to perfect that mapping technique, and they hadn't perfected it yet. And it was just that one time with that one scan while they were still in the experimentation phase that they got it right with Simon.
And that was with Simon. So Simon's technically the grandfather to all that.
Pretty much.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And I have some other theories with that too, but we'll have to get into it next time.
Well, thank you so much, Lori, for sharing this wonderful information. I can't wait till we cover the videos. So for those of you that are watching, turn on your notifications because we will be doing another SOMA stream where we're going to go over the transmission files, and that's like an hour's worth of footage that we're going to be going over, chit-chatting about, but they're all broken down into different videos, which I do have the links to the files that we read today and to the transmissions that we'll be taking a look at in the next stream in the description below. So if you have the time and you want to look at those yourself, feel free to.
Heads up for those of you that are under the age of 18 or like to watch videos at work, there is one that is not safe for work because it does have some nudity in it. You've been warned.
Okay, well, I will make sure, we'll make sure to go over that again during the actual stream itself.
Right. I'm just warning people that decide that they want to ahead of time go watch the transmission videos. So. That's FYI.
And while you're at it, go sub to Bohemian Dragon. I have dropped her link in the chat. You can't stop me. I've already done it.
And to those of you that have, thank you. I know I don't really have a lot of content on my channel right now. If you've been staying for this stream, you know why. I deal with a lot of mental health issues and a lot of health issues, and I've also been very, very busy with projects. Lots of projects.
Gotta stay stimulated.
As Shweeby knows. Yeah. So, anyways, thank you guys so much for hanging out with Shweeby and I. We really, really appreciate it.
Yes, and I cannot wait to delve even further into this lore because this is awesome. Alright, thank you all so much for watching. Hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications. Let's hear them. We have uncovered so much stuff and we still have more to go through battle cries. Woo! Yay! We'll see you guys in the next one. Bye!
Bye!